Chapter 391. Ren Baqian and the winged cavalry weren't the only ones going to Chesua Pass. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were also there. After the Empress left, both of them had been waiting here. Now that they were going to pick up the Empress, both of them brought along the Empress's carriage. When Ren Baqian and the others left the city, many commoners were also walking out of the city. They were going to bury the corpses. The road from the Great Xia barracks to the north was filled with all kinds of corpses. Given the weather in Great Xia, the corpses would start to smell in less than 2 days. It would be fine if there were only a few corpses, but such a large number could easily cause a plague. Therefore, they had to be buried. Furthermore, burying them underground could increase the fertility of the land. If the corpses were not far from the fields, many commoners were willing to bury them there. This would result in a much smaller harvest in the coming year. Ren Baqian had seen such a scene before. When Wu Shengho died and Great Xia was defeated, many commoners went out of the city in an organized manner the next day to carry the corpses to the fields and bury them. Ren Baqian looked at them in high spirits and felt that they weren't going to bury the corpses, but to pick up Jinkala, of course, they could also obtain a lot of benefits by collecting the corpses. After those soldiers were killed, they couldn't take away many weapons. There were still a lot of weapons scattered outside. Even if most of them were spears, they could still be made into small daggers. If they could pick up a few more spears or steel knives and smelt them into thick daggers, they would become family heirlooms. In such a situation, Dayo wouldn't take them back. In the past, there hadn't been any invasions. Now that there was enough iron or production in Mount Damo in the south, the imperial court didn't have the intention to touch these weapons. Half a month ago, apart from the weapons that were collected after the soldiers were killed and transported away by Li Qianxiu, the rest of the scattered weapons were given to the commoners of Liao City. With these weapons, the next time there was a war, these armed commoners would be able to make the enemy eat a pot of steaming hot **T. On Earth, it was important to keep wealth in the hands of the commoners. Now, it was to keep soldiers in the hands of the commoners. The next step was to head north. Along the way, Ren Baqian saw Lin Xiao tied to the back of a fork-horned cow, snoring. After hesitating for a long time, he reluctantly gave up the idea of finding a sparring partner for her. If the little Lolita was scratched by her, Tong Jinye would definitely fight it out with him. A day later, Ren Baqian and the others could finally see Chesua Pass in the distant horizon. Ren Baqian stood on the back of the fork-horned cow and looked through the binoculars. The gate of Chesua Pass was open, but very few people entered or exited. There were also more soldiers on the city walls than before. Although Great Xia had retreated, Hong Wu was still rather vigilant. The group walked for another half a day. When they were still 5 kilometers away from Iron Sua Pass, they could already see the garbage in front of them. Just like the outside of Liao City, before the Great Xia army retreated, they left behind a large amount of garbage. Although Hong would already sent people to clean up, it obviously wouldn't be done in a short period of time. Ren Baqian asked the troops to stop. Sister Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, you should enter the city first. We will leave tomorrow. Everyone looked at him. It would only take an hour to cover the distance of 5 kilometers. They didn't know what he meant. Wait here, Ren Baqian instructed. Then, he ran to a secluded spot in the woods that he had spotted earlier. He wanted to return to Earth. It was better to leave everyone outside the garbage dump than inside the garbage dump. After returning to the villa on Earth, Ren Baqian first drove to the city and bought a huge pile of sweets and chocolates. He bought 150 kilograms of all kinds of sweets, sorghum liquor, and hot pot base before returning home. Then he made a call to order a cotton candy machine and a large amount of colored candy. For the next 2 days, he had nothing to do, so he cooked cotton candy. After 2 days, he became very proficient. During this period, a housekeeper came to clean up the house. It was rare to see the owner of this villa. Do you want candy? Ren Baqian was cooking cotton candy in the living room. When he saw the housekeeper, he opened his mouth and asked, causing the other party to be a little confused. Ordinary people usually just passed him cigarettes, right? Could it be that rich people started to pass him candy? Then, the 2 housekeepers saw a large pile of cotton candy beside Ren Baqian. These were the results of Ren Baqian's cooking over the past 2 days. The two of them didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they took the cotton candy from Ren Baqian. With regards to Ren Baqian's behavior, the two of them could only attribute it to his unique hobby. On the third day, Ren Baqian returned to Dayo with big and small bags of things. After calling Hu over, he first walked 2 rounds in the forest before finding a tree that was the size that he had envisioned. Furthermore, it was relatively straight. The tree was 3 meters tall and as thick as a bowl. First, he asked someone to chop down the tree, clean up the leaves, and leave all the branches behind. Then, he took the tree through the garbage dump and arrived at Tiesua Pass. The situation at Tiesua Pass was much better than that of Liao City. Great Xia mainly surrounded the place but didn't attack. They only launched small-scale attacks every day. Other than Hong Wu, who was seriously injured, there weren't too many casualties. Even though the city walls were damaged, they weren't dyed purplish-black by blood like in Liao City. There were no interludes when entering the city. They went straight to a residence in the middle of the city. In general, there were intersections in the middle of the city. After all, there were gates in all directions. However, Tiesua Pass was different. In the middle of the city was a residence that occupied a large area. All the carriages and pedestrians had to go around it. This was the residence of Hong Wu, who had been guarding Tiesua Pass for decades. Although all the commoners and pedestrians had to take a detour wherever they went, no one complained. This was because this was a border pass, unlike other cities. The reason for placing this residence here was very simple. If the enemy broke through Tiesua Pass, they would have to go around it. At the same time, it was also to tell everyone that Hong Wu was here. Ren Baqian and everyone got off the 4-corn cow in front of the entrance. Just as they were about to report their identities, they were greeted by a burly man. That burly man first looked at Ren Baqian and the others suspiciously. Behind Ren Baqian were the palace guards and winged cavalry warriors, so it was easy for him to recognize them. Then, he suddenly realized something and pointed at Ren Baqian. "Ah, you are that fellow from before." Ren Baqian looked up and grinned. This guy was the one who wanted to use a beautiful servant to exchange for a drone and got kicked into the wall by the Empress. "Is Her Majesty here?" The principal of Black Bamboo Academy, Ren Baqian, requests an audience. "Yes." That burly man scratched his head, turned around, and kicked a bodyguard behind him. "Go and inform her." He jumped down from the stairs, hooked his arm around Ren Baqian's shoulder, and asked, that flying thing in the sky, do you still have more? How about me?" Although Great Xia mainly launched small-scale attacks these days, there were also 2 surprise attacks. However, the 2 drones took turns to check on the movements of the Great Xia army. Furthermore, the binoculars could be seen from the city. Every move couldn't be hidden from the generals in Tiesua Pass. As long as there was a slight change in the military strength, it would be immediately detected. He had been eyeing this kind of magical weapon for a long time. Unfortunately, Great General Hong Wu also treated it as a treasure and didn't even let him touch it. "Beautiful servant," Ren Baqian asked with a mischievous smile. He wondered if the Empress would jump out and give him a kick. Sometimes, the Empress was quite elusive. That burly man looked conflicted and hesitant. Finally, with a wretched look, he whispered, "Leave an address. I will send it to you when the time comes." Whoosh! Bang! Aya! Ren Baqian was hit in the face by a piece of falling roof tile. On a distant roof, the Empress looked up at the sky. Before anyone realized that she was the one who threw the tile, she flashed back to the courtyard. Just now, when she saw the expressions of those 2 fellows, she felt like throwing stones at them. Chapter 392. Is my face disfigured? Ren Baqian pulled Hu and pointed at his face. He still relied on this face to earn a living. Who would have thought that he would be ambushed at the entrance of Hong Wu's residence after such a huge storm? Hong Wu couldn't tolerate this. If his face was disfigured, he would have to demand an explanation from Hong Wu. "Not bad, not bad." Hu touched the back of his head and giggled. "Good my ass." Ren Baqian touched the cloth that was stuffed into his nostrils. His nose was sore and swollen, and there were bloodstains on his forehead. "Sir Ren, what happened to you?" Qing Yuan came out and asked in surprise when she saw Ren Baqian's nose was stuffed with a piece of cloth. His forehead was red, and there were even 2 cuts. I was ambushed. Ren Baqian felt wronged. Who did he offend? He was actually ambushed by someone. Her Majesty has summoned you. Qing Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. Ren Baqian stuffed a white rabbit creamy candy into Qing Yuan's hands. This thing was very useful in opening up roads. When he had money, he would definitely buy the white rabbit creamy candy factory. Sure enough, Qing Yuan was beaming with joy. Sir Ren, where should I send it to? That general pulled Ren Baqian's sleeves and asked sneakily. He still hadn't given up. The palace, Pingle Park. Ren Baqian replied without turning his head. If you have the ability, send it there. Let's see if the Empress will hang you on top of the city wall and make you into bacon. Ren Baqian, Sure Hu, and a few winged cavalry captains followed Qing Yuan through 2 courtyards and arrived in front of a room, leaving behind the conflicted and melancholy general. From the outside, the room wasn't very big, and the decorations were relatively ordinary. Hongwu had never paid much attention to these things. Ren Baqian entered the room and saw the Empress sitting at the table. She was using her fingers to poke holes in the 2-inch thick table. He looked around. The room wasn't very big and was about 50 to 60 square meters. To the Empress, this could be considered a humble abode. The furnishings were also very simple. A bow was hung on the wall at the side, and it was the only decoration in this room. There was a very big bed with pink muslin hanging around it, giving the room a little more of a lady's boudoir. Hongwu must have arranged this after the Empress moved in. In addition, there was that table and the radio station on it. Greetings, Your Majesty, everyone said in unison. Ren Baqian then continued to lie through his teeth. Her Majesty has lost some weight. Did I? The Empress looked up at him and touched her cheek. Yes, but he looks even more heroic, Ren Baqian added. What happened to your face? The Empress asked casually. I was attacked at the entrance, Ren Baqian complained with an aggrieved look. Oh, Sure Hu has failed to protect you. You will be fined 1 month's salary. The Empress looked at him and couldn't bear to do so. She casually fined him 1 month's salary. Sure Hu lowered his head. It's all this official's fault. The Empress cast a sidelong glance at him. Of course, it was his fault. Otherwise, it was her fault. As for the matter of Ren Baqian being attacked in front of Hongwu's residence, it was just like that. Where's the rainbow cloud? The Empress tilted her head to the side, seemingly trying to see if the rainbow cloud was outside. When Your Majesty is ready to leave, you will naturally see it. If Your Majesty wants to leave, you should leave on the rainbow cloud. In the future, the commoners of Tiesua Pass will also be able to spread Your Majesty's heroic bearing to the world. The Empress poked her chin with her finger. She was somewhat tempted. Your Majesty, I have brought other gifts. Please allow me to go out and prepare them, Ren Baqian said. Go and come back quickly. Although the Empress wanted to ask Ren Baqian some questions, she was also very interested in his gifts. She had been staying in Tiesua Pass for more than half a month. Apart from recuperating from her injuries, there was nothing else she could do. She had long felt bored. I need some time. Ren Baqian excused himself and hurriedly left with Sure Hu, leaving a few winged cavalry captains to question the Empress. After leaving the room, Ren Baqian went straight to the entrance of the residence. Just as he left the courtyard, he met Hongwu, who was wearing a green shirt. Greetings, great general. Ren Baqian cupped his hands and bowed. Logically speaking, he should have gone to pay his respects. Hongwu glared at Ren Baqian, who was about to steal the cabbage that he had raised for many years. Without saying a word, he walked past Ren Baqian. Did I provoke him? Ren Baqian was suspicious. He was very surprised by Hongwu's attitude. At least when he returned from Great Xia, Hongwu wasn't this bad. He could still occasionally say a few words. I was slapped in the face by someone at his doorstep, and I haven't even looked for him. He is actually so unreasonable, Ren Baqian said indignantly. Sure Hu lowered his head and didn't say a word. Hongwu was the military god of Dayo, and Ren Baqian was his immediate superior. In the future, he would also be a prince consort. No matter what anyone said, he couldn't interrupt. Forget it. It wasn't easy for the old man to be seriously injured. Rin Baqian shook his head. Hong Wu, who had just walked out of the courtyard, suddenly stopped in his tracks and became even angrier. Anybody would be angry when someone else's pig came to steal their cabbage and scolded them. However, it wasn't worth finding trouble with Rin Baqian over this matter, because he had already decided to teach that fellow a lesson. Rin Baqian brought Hu outside and moved his belongings into the courtyard. Then he dug a hole in the ground and placed a tree on the ground. A few guards hung candies on the tree according to Rin Baqian's instructions, while Rin Baqian boiled cotton candy. Every time a cotton candy the size of a human head was brewed, he would hang it on the tree. Not long after, the tree, which was originally bare and only had branches, became brightly colored. All kinds of candy wrappers and colorful cotton candy made the tree look gorgeous and colorful. More importantly, the smell of cotton candy drifted very far. Even Qing Yuan and Hong Wan ran out of their rooms to take a look. Their eyes were almost shining. One could imagine the lethality of such a tree with candies and cotton candy on it for girls. Just as Rin Baqian lowered his head, a figure appeared under the tree and climbed up. Librarian Lin. A few guards under the tree shouted. Rin Baqian looked up and saw Lin Xiaola squatting on a branch that was as thick as a fist. She held a cotton candy in her hand, took a bite, and squinted her eyes. Her other hand was still plucking lollipops from the tree and stuffing them into her bosom. Her movements were so fast that it almost looked like an afterimage. Seeing that her chest size had increased by 3 times, one of the candies that were already hanging on the tree was missing. "Come down," Rin Baqian shouted with his eyes wide open. Lin Xiaola blinked her eyes and said, "Protection fee in advance. Give me this tree and I will protect you for a year. You aren't even as expensive as this tree." Rin Baqian looked at the piece of candy that was hanging on the tree that was missing and was exasperated. Lin Xiaola hesitated and said, 2 years. Rin Baqian was speechless. "Come down, I will give you white rabbit creamy candies." Rin Baqian looked at the piece of candy missing from the tree and felt distressed. The next second, Lin Xiaola's hand was under Rin Baqian's eyelids. Rin Baqian grabbed a handful of white rabbit creamy candies from the bag at his waist and gave them to Lin Xiaola. In the end, Lin Xiaola snatched the cotton candy from Rin Baqian's hand, ran to the side, and took a bite with each hand. From time to time, she looked up at the tree enviously. Rin Baqian turned his head and saw the envious look on Lin Xiaola's face. His heart softened as he sighed and said, "Let's continue hanging it." Fortunately, he had brought a lot of candies this time, 150 kilograms, which was enough to hang the tree several times. Chapter 393. The people inside the courtyard had heard everything clearly. The Empress tried her best not to look at what Rin Baqian was doing. She spoke to Hong Wu from time to time, and it was obvious that she was somewhat absent-minded. Hong Wu sighed when he saw her like this, sat down for a while, and left. When he went out, he saw Rin Baqian working on the candy tree and snorted. This guy was doing this kind of crooked trick again. He couldn't think of the word sycophant, even after thinking about it a few times. However, this was what he was thinking. The Protectorate of the Northeast was still at war with the Yun nation. Although Great Xia had retreated, this matter obviously couldn't be forgotten. Furthermore, the entire north of the nation was in a state of depression. Under such circumstances, as an official, Rin Baqian didn't think of proper ways to do proper work, and instead made these childish things to please the Empress. This made Hong Wu very angry. If Rin Baqian wasn't capable, Hong Wu wouldn't be so resentful and would at most look down on him. However, from the variety of things that Rin Baqian made, he seemed to be quite capable. Hong Wu was even more dissatisfied that Rin Baqian made these things as soon as he arrived. Rin Baqian squinted at Hong Wu while making the cotton candy. "Are you going to bite me? I didn't do anything to you or provoke you. Why are you snorting for no reason?" It took a lot of time to redecorate the tree. The 3-meter-tall tree was covered with layers of colorful cotton candy on the outside and all kinds of candies and chocolates on the inside. From afar, it looked very attractive with red and green colors. Rin Baqian made 2 more cotton candy and gave them to Qing Yuan and Hong Wan. The 2 of them looked at him greedily, But the Empress was inside and didn't dare to ask for more. Lin Xiaola, on the other hand, was sitting on top of the wall with a lollipop in her mouth. Her eyes were closed, and her head kept nodding down. Within a few minutes, she fell off the wall. She woke up with a start the moment she fell off the wall. When she realized that she was falling off the wall, she curled her body into a ball and did a somersault in the air. Boom! Lin Xiaola didn't feel any pain after falling to the ground. Her eyes were wide open, and she was obviously in a daze. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? In less than a minute, her eyes closed again, and her body fell to the side with a gurgling sound coming from her throat. Ren Baqian turned to look at her and shook his head. This fellow was hopeless. Ren Baqian entered the house and saw that the Empress was still sitting in front of the table in a daze. He said, "Your Majesty, the gifts are ready. Do you want to place them in the house?" "All right." The Water Empress nodded. Just now. After Hongwu left, she sneaked a peek and was very tempted. Ren Baqian looked up at the roof, calculated that it was high enough, and said, "Your Majesty, I want to dig a hole in the ground." The Empress did not ask why and continued to nod her head. "All right." Ren Baqian turned his head and shouted for sure who to come in. In an empty space at the side of the room, he smashed a stone slab on the ground into pieces and instructed someone to dig a hole there. After the pit was dug, Ren Baqian instructed his men to uproot the tree, plant it in the pit, and fill it with soil. As soon as the tree was brought in, it attracted the Empress's attention. Her eyes followed the tree closely, especially the sweet smell of the cotton candy. It made her heart itch. "What is this?" the Empress finally asked. "Your Majesty, let me introduce this solemnly. This is the candy forest within the wine pool and fruit forest in heaven." Ren Baqian pointed at the tree with both hands and introduced it very solemnly. In Dayo, the value of meat wasn't high. People's staple food was meat, so it was very easy to make a meat forest and didn't cost much. Especially for the Empress, the candy forest was the way to go. If the emperor who said, "Why not eat minced meat?" was in Dayo, he would definitely not be recorded in the history books. Why not eat meat? Isn't it cheap to eat meat? There's nothing wrong with it. The Empress was extremely excited. This candy tree was very interesting to her and was more to her liking than other gifts. She nodded deeply and asked, "Very much to my liking. But what is a wine pool?" As the name suggests, a pool is filled with wine. People in the pool can open their mouth to drink wine and live a drunken life every day. The Empress thought of that scene and was somewhat tempted. However, how much wine would it take to fill a pool? "I want a wine pool." The Empress's eyes lit up. "When we return to the palace, I will build one for your Majesty." Ren Baqian immediately said. It wasn't troublesome to build a wine pool, but it would take some time. It wasn't something that could be gathered in a day or two. Ren Baqian took a pair of extra-long scissors from the hands of the bodyguard. There were 2 wooden sticks tied to the handles of the scissors. He stood under the tree for a long time before using the scissors to cut the rope that was tied to a cotton candy stick. This kind of scissors wasn't easy to control and would easily miss. Ren Baqian quickly grabbed the cotton candy and passed it to the Empress. "Your Majesty, try it. This candy forest needs to be cut to be interesting." Reaching out to pluck something wasn't as fun as cutting it with scissors. It had to be slightly more troublesome to be interesting. It was just like how many people were willing to use the claw machine, even though the money from it was enough to buy a doll. This was something that Ren Baqian suddenly thought of. When he returned, he would find a place to build a claw machine and stuff the dolls with candy. He would give the Empress 100 coins every day and then adjust the probability of the claw machine. The Empress would be able to catch 1 or 2 candy dolls with 100 coins. It would definitely be very interesting. That is, if the Empress didn't smash the claw machine. The Empress took a bite of the cotton candy and nodded her head in satisfaction. With this candy tree, she wouldn't mind even without the rainbow clouds. "Your Majesty, do you want to try?" Ren Baqian asked as he watched the Empress eat the cotton candy mouthful by mouthful. The Empress took the scissors and immediately discovered a problem. The wooden sticks at the back weren't tied tightly, and the scissors would sway. However, this was a small problem for her. Her hands moved as fast as lightning, and candy began to fall from her head. It was just like picking fruits in the forest. As the candy fell, the Empress seemed very happy and excited like a little girl. Her hands didn't stop moving, and candy fell to the ground in no time. "The harvest is indeed joyous," Rinpoche commented. The Empress rolled her eyes, stuffed the scissors into Rinpoche's hands, and walked back to the table with her hands behind her back. She walked on tiptoe and looked very happy. Staying at Tiesua Pass for more than half a month was too boring. Now that Rinpoche was here, she finally had some fun. The Empress's happiness spread to Rinpoche, causing him to smile. He collected the candy on the ground and placed it on the table for the Empress. Then, he instructed the guards to continue hanging candy on the tree. Rinpoche walked to the Empress's side, took out the little red flower, and said, "Your Majesty, I saw that this flower is outstanding and has the bearing of an empress. I felt that I should pick it and give it to you." The guards who were hanging the candy at the side looked sideways at the sky and then at the roof. "A few days ago, when you picked a bunch of flowers at the city commander's residence, they all saw it." The Empress held the half-dried flower in her hand. The color was red, which she liked, but she felt that it looked a little familiar. "This seems to be a flower planted at the city commander's residence in Liao City?" The Empress asked doubtfully. This kind of flower didn't exist in Lan City, but she had some impression of it after staying at the city commander's residence for a month. "It turns out that this flower has been contaminated with your Majesty's aura. No wonder it has the bearing of an empress." Rinpoche was full of nonsense. The Empress rolled her eyes, looked at him, and said, "You are always by my side. Have you been contaminated with my aura?" "I have been contaminated with your Majesty's aura." Rinpoche thought for a while, and felt that these words sounded like a dog relying on its master's power. "I have been contaminated with your Majesty's aura." This sounded like a fox exploiting the tiger's might. Chapter 394. A hot pot was placed on the table in the room. As the temperature of the water rose, the soup in the hot pot began to boil, and the bottom of the pot came out from time to time. Upon seeing this, Rinpoche quickly placed the meat and wild vegetables in the pot, and the aroma immediately came out. When they were waiting for the hot pot soup to boil, the three of them stared at each other and didn't have much to say. Now that the soup was boiling, the deadlock was broken. Rinpoche, the Empress, and Hongwu, who had mastered the art of changing faces. When facing the Empress, it was like a gentle breeze, but when looking at Rinpoche, it was as cold as ice. The instantaneous change in expression was breathtaking. Even Rinpoche wanted to ask Hongwu if he was eating from him or stealing from him. Why did he have such a cold face when he saw me? With such a person present, Rinpoche's mood immediately turned sour. The Empress had always been cold. If Rinpoche didn't speak, she wouldn't either. Hongwu stood there like a light bulb. Now that the hot pot was ready, the atmosphere became more lively as Rinpoche started to move. The Empress stared at the meat floating in the hot pot and focused all her attention on it. "Your Majesty," Rinpoche dipped the meat and placed it on the Empress's plate before disappearing in an instant. The Empress had been craving food these days. Rinpoche poured wine for the Empress before pouring wine for himself. "I wish your Majesty prosperity in martial arts." Rinpoche raised his cup and toasted. The Empress downed the wine in one gulp. As the wine entered her stomach, her eyes became brighter. "I congratulate your Majesty for killing Lu Qi and intimidating Great Xia." Rinpoche toasted again. Although Rinpoche said it casually, it was the truth. In the past 6 months, the Empress had killed the 5th most powerful expert in the world, Hua Sanlu, the Zhumu elders, and Lu Qi, who was originally the 8th most powerful expert in the world, but rose to the 7th most powerful expert because of the Empress. The news of the defeat of Great Xia and the loss of 500,000 soldiers spread throughout Great Xia. The Empress's reputation for killing was now deeply rooted in the hearts of Great Xia. Countless warriors and scholars were discussing Dao's Qi Zi Xiao in the streets, alleys, and taverns. All of them were amazed. One had to know that 3 years ago, Because the Empress was young and didn't have many battles with experts, she was ranked among the top 10 in the world. Many people had their doubts. As a result, there were always people challenging the Empress for the next 2 years. Even though none of the challengers survived, the Empress still hadn't fought against a top-notch expert. It was only in the past 6 months that he had shaken the world 3 times in succession. Outside of Dayo, his reputation had already overshadowed that of Hong Wu, who had guarded the borders for decades. After all, this kind of top-notch expert, and a young woman at that, with peerless beauty, would attract even more attention. Unfortunately, I heard that she raised a gigolo. This third cup, even though I didn't do anything, I still want to thank myself for the hard work. Ren Baqian said sincerely after thinking for a while. When Hong Wu heard this, his beard stood up, and he almost smashed the bowl on Ren Baqian's face. This guy's shameless demeanor was even worse than that bastard Tongjinya when he was young. If he had known that this person was like this, he would have risked his life to stop Her Majesty from choosing him as her husband. Upon hearing this, the Empress's eyes curved into crescents. She looked at Rinpochian with her clear eyes and asked, "Do you want me to pour you some wine?" "I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself." Rinpochian chuckled and finished the wine. "I salute the great general for his hard work," the Empress said to Hong Wu while fiddling with the wine cup. "Thank you, Your Majesty. This is my duty." Hong Wu held the cup with both hands and didn't forget to glare at Rinpochian. In any case, the room was livelier than before. It was much better than before. "Your Majesty, what should we do next?" Rinpochian raised his cup and asked. "What do you mean?" The Empress's eyes flickered as she didn't quite understand what he meant. Great Xia came to fight and retreated in defeat. "What's next?" Rinpochian asked. "The commoners who escaped into the city should return to their villages and reorganize their fields. However, some of the villages have been burned down and the crops for this season have been destroyed. I'm afraid that the people's livelihood will be difficult for the next 2 seasons, so their taxes should be reduced," Hong Wu said. This was a major issue in his eyes. The cities that have been destroyed also need to be rebuilt. "What's next?" Rinpochian continued to ask. "Principal Ren, if you have something to say, just say it," Hong Wu said. "What I mean is, shouldn't we ask Great Xia for compensation for their defeat?" Rinpochian asked. "Compensation for defeat?" Hong Wu and the Empress looked at him. This term had never been used in this world before. Rinpochian saw that they didn't understand and explained, "They can't just come and fight as they please and retreat after losing, right? We have suffered so many casualties, so 100 taels of silver for each man will expert isn't too much, right? Don't they have to compensate for the funeral expenses?" There were at least 100,000 casualties, which would be 10 million taels of silver. Also, the families of those who died and were injured also need to be compensated, right? One had to know that they had lost their loved ones because of Great Xia's atrocities. Even though money couldn't make up for their psychological trauma, not paying them was absolutely unacceptable. In addition, Your Majesty, you haven't been eating or sleeping well these days, and you've even lost half a kilogram. This should be compensated, right? Also, we spent a lot of manpower and material resources to build those cities, but they were destroyed by Great Xia's invasion. This matter must be solved with money. Also, they cut down so many of our trees to attack the cities. It takes 10 years to grow trees and 100 years to nurture people. How many years will it take for those trees to grow again? We still have to pay for the things we buy, and they have to compensate for the trees that they robbed. Also, they left behind so much rubbish when they retreated. I don't know how much manpower and material resources will be needed to clean up this rubbish. Even though it's inevitable that there will be casualties during a battle, these are all caused by Great Xia. No matter how you look at it, they should be the ones to compensate. This is the compensation, and there's also the compensation for defeat. They can't just fight whenever they want, right? They fought and lost, so they have to compensate. Rinpochian counted with his fingers for the 2 of them. "Finally, they robbed me of 5 million taels of silver. You have to return this to me, right?" Hong Wu and the Empress's faces were bright and full of expression. Rinpochian's words were an eye-opener for them, as they had never heard of compensation for defeat. Also, what's with the last 5 million taels of silver? When were you robbed of 5 million taels of silver? How could Xiao Bailong possibly agree to these demands? Hong Wu was flabbergasted at first, and then he said coldly, if he doesn't want to pay, he can just go and get it himself. I heard that they already have 180,000 soldiers at the border. It's difficult to even guard the border. If an army were to enter the hinterland of Great Xia, they wouldn't be able to do anything, right? Their new soldiers can't be trained in a few months. Even if they were to transfer troops from other places, it wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. With this amount of time, we can already do a lot of things. After robbing them, we can spread the word that the Emperor of Great Xia refused to compensate us for our losses and that he was the one who invaded us first. However, he doesn't want to bear the consequences and doesn't care about the civilians in those cities. I'm afraid that it will backfire. Those civilians will still hate us, Hong Wu said after thinking seriously. Even though he didn't like Ren Baqian, he would temporarily put aside his prejudice when it came to proper business. He was still a little tempted to rob them. After all, no one would be able to take it lying down after being beaten up for no reason. Needless to say, he was a veteran at the border who had been in the army for decades. The human heart is the most unpredictable thing. It's not uncommon for a person to hate his protector because his protector didn't protect him well, causing him to be hurt by others. Ren Baqian shook his head. Moreover, they don't necessarily like us now. Hong Wu agreed with Ren Baqian's last sentence. The problem now is that there's still the Yun nation. Hong Wu frowned. At present, the Protector of the Northeast was still at war with the Yun nation, and the Protector of the North had just ended its war with Great Xia. If they were to start a war with Great Xia now, they would probably fall into a quagmire again. The first batch of 20,000 new soldiers will be ready in 2 months. If it's just the Yun nation, we won't be able to cause much trouble in 2 months. On the other hand, Great Xia is probably licking its wounds and recuperating. Who knows when they will attack us again? In particular, when we are at war with the Yun nation, they are silently sharpening their claws. Instead of this, we might as well give them some trouble first. At least before we deal with the Yun nation, they won't be able to care about us, Ren Baqian said. It won't take long to deal with the Yun nation, Hong Wu said. He wanted to seek stability and deal with the Yun nation first before dealing with Great Xia. The Yun nation was much easier to deal with than Great Xia. It's easy to repel the Yun nation, but it won't be easy to occupy them in a short period of time, Ren Baqian said. Hong Wu was shocked to hear this and looked at the Empress. The Empress nodded her head slightly, acknowledging Ren Baqian's words. Even though the Yun nation is smaller than Dayo, it has a large population and the situation is complicated. If we want to occupy the Yun nation, we will need to maintain a large number of troops. Even though there are advantages to occupying the Yun nation, there are also many disadvantages. Just like in the South, those people are always dishonest. They occupy a large piece of land and even implicate an entire protectorate. Hong Wu frowned. He didn't know when the Empress and Ren Baqian came up with this idea, but it would be difficult for Dayo to annex the Yun nation. If the South and the Yun nation were to join forces, it would probably involve a lot of energy. In his opinion, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. Regarding this idea, his first reaction was to oppose it. After all, apart from the lack of salt and iron, Dayo was still doing well in other aspects. Furthermore, the salt and iron issues had already been resolved. There was no need to take the risk of annexing the Yun nation and spending a lot of energy to govern it. If things went wrong, they might end up in a quagmire. One had to know that the Yun nation wasn't a small country. Its population was even larger than Dayo's. At present, Dayo couldn't find that many officials that could be used after occupying the Yun nation. However, the Yun nation has what we need the most, Ren Baqian summarized. Regardless of whether it was salt, iron, minerals, or population, Dayo needed them in all aspects. If Dayo wanted to develop quickly, the various products of the Yun nation would be very important. Furthermore, I already have some ideas on how to govern the Yun nation, Ren Baqian said. Hong Wu glanced at him. He was doubtful of his words. This matter is of great importance. Your Majesty, you have to reconsider. Hong Wu cupped his hands. "I've made up my mind," the Empress said faintly. After on Earth, she realized how barren Dayo was. Therefore, it was necessary to obtain a land like the Yun nation that was rich in mineral resources. "Great General, you don't have to worry too much. When the time comes, we can look at the situation. If things don't work out, we can bring back a lot of resources from the Yun nation," Rinpoche added. Hearing this, Hong Wu was finally relieved, but his eyebrows were still knitted together. War wasn't child's play. Occupying such a large country and incorporating it into one's territory wasn't child's play either. Chapter 395. Hong Wu left with a frown. He still had doubts about swallowing the Yun nation. It wasn't difficult to conquer the Yun nation. The problem was that it would easily drag Dayo into a quagmire. Those experts who stayed out of the war wouldn't sit idly by either. If they wanted to stabilize the situation in the Yun nation, they needed a lot of troops. However, there was one thing that he immediately did. The next morning, he sent a letter to Tiesua Pass and handed it over to the current commander of Great Xia, Guide General Ziyi. At noon, Ziyi opened the letter that was delivered to him in his residence. He saw that he looked like a chicken that had crawled out of its claw. After carefully reading the letter, he saw that it was a list of compensation that Great Xia had to pay. This included various funeral expenses, expenses for repairing the city walls, compensation for mental damage. Finally, there was the 5 million taels of silver that was robbed by the Jirwa city guards. In total, there was a total of 105 million taels of silver, which was the annual income of Great Xia's treasury. Ziyi was stunned. After reading it carefully, he felt that he had seen wrongly. After reading it 3 times and confirming that he hadn't seen wrongly, he tore the letter into pieces. At the same time, he said coldly, "Could it be that they are crazy?" Then he ordered chase them out. Compensation? What a joke. There had never been such a thing. In the evening, Hong Wu received the report and reported it to the Empress. "Just as we expected, the commander of Great Xia has chased the messenger back," Hong Wu said. "Just as I said before, go and get it yourself," the Empress said faintly. "Your Majesty, who should we send?" Hong Wu asked. One had to know that the winged cavalry wouldn't be enough to transport the goods back to Great Xia. Furthermore, the winged cavalry lacked top-notch experts. The strongest was the winged cavalry's protector general, who was equivalent to a spirit wheel expert. "Let Li Chinchio go," the Empress said after some thought. With Li Chinchio's strength, as long as he didn't encounter a top-notch expert, there shouldn't be any problems. The next day, the Empress, Hong Wu, and Rinpoche circled an area in Hong Wu's study. Then, the Empress used the radio to call for Li Chinchio. 2 days later, Li Chinchio, who was resting near Liao City, arrived at Ping City with 6,000 soldiers from the Protectorate of the Center. The 3 of them spent the entire afternoon researching in Hong Wu's study. The next day, Li Chinchio led the winged cavalry, 3,000 soldiers, all the 4-corn cows in Ping City that could be used as mounts, and a large number of water buffaloes that could be used as rations. They headed straight for the west and prepared to cross the Liaoning mountain range and head toward Great Xia. Along with them were the 1,000 grenades that Rinpoche had prepared. This thing would be of great use in the face of the Great Xia military formation. To disrupt the enemy's formation, 1,000 pills were enough for 3 battles. It was more than enough. Both sides had radios that could contact each other at any time. If they wanted to return, Hong Wu could send troops to attack Tiesua Pass to reinforce them. As for the rest, it all depended on Li Chinchio. One day after Li Chinchio left, Rinpoche said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, it's time for us to return." Li Chinchio's return trip would take at least a month. The Empress had been away from Lan City for a long time, and it was time for her to return. "We'll set off tomorrow." The Empress nodded. After saying this, the Empress glanced at Rinpoche again. The meaning behind her words was very clear. "Where's the rainbow cloud that he mentioned?" "Your Majesty, the cloud is still on its way. Why don't we wait for another 3 days?" Rinpoche hurriedly suggested. Previously, when he came back, he only brought the grenades and some equipment. There was still one extremely important thing that he didn't get. In that case, Let's wait for another 3 days, the Empress said indifferently. Although she was already tired of staying in Ping City, there was no harm in waiting for another 3 days. After another day, Ren Baqian and the Empress returned to Earth together. It had been more than 2 months since the start of the war. More than half a year had passed on Earth. The last time the Empress was here, it was still autumn. Now, it was already the end of spring and the beginning of summer. The weather was just right. The first thing that came into the Empress's sight was an unfamiliar room. It was much bigger than the previous house. On one side, there was a floor-to-ceiling window. Bright and beautiful sunlight shone in through the window. Standing at the Empress's position, she could see the lush greenery outside the window. In the past, there were only tall buildings outside the window, but now they were gone. Your Majesty, this is our new house, Ren Baqian said. Oh, the Empress responded faintly. She wasn't interested in this. Your Majesty, follow me. You will definitely like it. Ren Baqian held the Empress's hand. It was very soft and warm. He hadn't held her hand like this for a long time, and it made him a little excited. After opening the door, there was a very spacious corridor. At the end of the corridor was a table and a pot of flowers. Above it was a window. Diagonally across from Ren Baqian's room was the room reserved for the Empress. It was 3 times the size of the previous room. There was a huge mirror and a row of wardrobes that barely contained the Empress's clothes. Next to the window was a princess bed. Your Majesty, this is your room, Ren Baqian introduced. The Empress tilted her head. In the previous house, she and Ren Baqian had 2 floors. Now, they were diagonally across from each other. I have brought all your clothes over. Ren Baqian opened the wardrobe and revealed a sea of red. Almost all of them were red dresses. The Empress was a little happy to see these dresses. Although she hadn't worn most of these dresses, women didn't buy clothes just to wear them. Seeing them placed there would make people happy. Next is this. Ren Baqian opened another door. The room was surrounded by shelves with a dazzling array of snacks. Most of the things that the Empress liked to eat could be found here. In the middle of the room were 3 freezers that were filled with ice cream. Upon seeing this room, the Empress shook off Ren Baqian's hand and walked in alone. She took out a chocolate cake, opened it, and put it in her mouth. Then, she walked around the room. She had a faint smile on her face. Although she felt that this place was very good and liked it, it didn't make her as happy as the candy tree. Overall, she was still very satisfied. Ren Baqian leaned against the wall and watched the Empress walk around the room with a smile on his face. Next is the next floor. Ren Baqian and the Empress went to the first floor. The living room was very big, but they didn't pay much attention to it. Ren Baqian directly pushed open a door, and what was reflected in the room was a broken light. The room was very big, even bigger than the 2 bedrooms upstairs combined. It was covered with colorful tiles and was filled with a Mediterranean style. In the middle was a swimming pool that was about 100 square meters. The water inside was so clear that the bottom could be seen. Next to the pool were 3 reclining chairs and a side table. Ren Baqian eagerly introduced, Your Majesty, you can swim here in the future. Just think about it, swimming here, soaking in the cool water while I serve tea and pour wine for His Majesty. It's so fascinating. I've even prepared a swimsuit for His Majesty. Do you want to give it a try? You seem to want me to give it a try? The Empress turned to look at him. Chapter 396. Your Majesty, there are no outsiders here. It will be cool to soak in the water. The Empress looked at him, stretched out her hand, and sent him flying into the pool. I don't feel hot in this weather. You should go down by yourself, the Empress said faintly and went upstairs to change her clothes. She was well aware of Ren Baqian's intentions. It wasn't like she hadn't been to the seaside before, but she didn't really care and was just a little shy. Plop! Ren Baqian began to panic when he fell into the water. He didn't know how to swim. Gulp, gulp, gulp. He gulped down large mouthfuls of water and finally stabilized himself. When he stood up, he realized that the water was only slightly above his chest. After all, the depth of this pool was only about 4 meters. After climbing out of the pool, Ren Baqian lay on the edge of the pool and spat out water like a fountain. He was finally alive. He thought that he would have to learn how to swim sooner or later. It would be a tragedy if a dignified man-wheel expert like him drowned in a pool that was 1 4 meters deep. He took a towel from his side and wiped his head before returning to his room to change his clothes. When he came out, he heard the sound of the television downstairs. When he went downstairs, he found the Empress curled up on the sofa eating ice cream. "Do you want to go out for a walk?" Rinpoche asked as he sat beside her. "You have worked hard these days." "Okay." The Empress nodded cheerfully. These days in Ping City were really boring, and it was good to go out for a walk. As he drove down the mountain, Rinpoche casually talked about what happened a few days ago and said, "There seems to be something disturbing me in my mind. I always want to kill that person. Also, all kinds of thoughts come out. I don't know if there is a problem with the metal chain or something else affecting me." Rinpoche didn't say that Qi Jiayu looked exactly like the Empress. He just wanted to hear her opinion. Although the Aboriginals didn't cultivate their minds, the Empress was more or less able to understand them with her strength. The metal chain emerged from Rinpoche's head. Did someone shout at it just now? The Empress grabbed the metal chain that had just emerged from Rinpoche's head and tried to twist it into an S shape. She carefully sensed it and said doubtfully, "This thing shouldn't affect you. Furthermore, there's nothing else in your soul see other than this metal chain." The Empress fiddled with the metal chain in her hand and twirled it around her palm a few times. The metal chain couldn't escape even if it wanted to. "It turns out that your Majesty is also proficient in this area." After hearing what the Empress said, Rinpoche felt that she seemed to know more than he thought. "I don't know much about it, but there's a sliver of my soul in your body. If something happens, I will be able to sense it," the Empress said faintly. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche subconsciously stepped on the accelerator. The car behind him almost hit Rinpoche, and the driver of the car was so angry that he pressed on the horn and cursed loudly. "Part of my body?" Rinpoche was dumbfounded. "At that time, I thought that if you let me down, you would not be able to escape death no matter where you went," the Empress said faintly. "If you didn't betray me and were killed by someone else, this wisp of soul will be able to wrap around that person's body. I will be able to find him and kill him no matter where he goes." Rinpoche widened his eyes. "Damn, when did this happen? He had such a dangerous thing on him? Usually, it doesn't affect you. I did a long time ago." The Empress turned her head and didn't look at him. Rinpoche opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. Could it be that the Empress was afraid that he would run away in the past? Otherwise, why would she do this? If he was in Lan City, the Empress could kill him with one finger. "Why would I let you down?" Rinpoche said softly. "Being able to know you is arranged by God. God is the most powerful. Moreover, you are the only treasure in the world. To be able to be with you, I have nothing else to ask for in this life." The Empress's ears felt warm and she was elated. Her fingers subconsciously poked at the car door. From the outside, one could only see the door being poked open like a piece of paper. Then another finger poked out. The driver of the car beside them was stunned. Rinpoche continued to drive forward and asked, "Is it easy to split your soul? Doesn't it affect you?" "It's very painful," the Empress said faintly. For her to say that it was painful, it was indeed very painful. It was as if she was being torn apart. However, she didn't expect it to be so painful. Otherwise, she probably would have hesitated. This was a secret technique passed down in the Aboriginal tribes. Only the supreme geniuses could do it, but it could only be done once. Only when one reached longevity heaven could they separate their soul for the second time. However, every time they split their soul, they would experience the pain of their body being torn apart. As a result, very few people used this technique. At this point, Rinpoche already knew why he wanted to kill Qi Jiayu when he saw her. As for why he had those thoughts, it was probably because he was affected by that split soul. It was just like when he saw the seventh prince. When the split soul saw Qi Jiayu, it also had the same reaction. According to what he thought, this was, after all, a split soul and was different from the real person. Therefore, when the killing intent arose, it also evoked all kinds of thoughts. Rinpoche didn't mention this matter again. He really liked the Empress. Having such a woman to spend a lifetime with was really enough for him. At this point, he knew that he wouldn't do anything to let the Empress down and naturally didn't care about this split soul. Can you sense what the split soul sees? Rinpoche suddenly remembered something. I can't. Since this split soul has been separated, I can only sense its location at most. Oh, Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as he could retain his privacy. What if he went to a spa in the future? If the Empress peeped at him from the side, he would probably be hung on the city wall and turned into bacon when he returned. As for the matter with Chi Jieyu, he put it aside as he hadn't decided what to do. Although he knew that he was affected by the split soul of the Empress, the influence was already there. That kind of thought had appeared in his mind and left a trace. Therefore, he was still somewhat concerned about Chi Jieyu. However, this matter would be considered later. For the next 2 days, the two of them had nothing to do and strolled around Shanghai, looking at the dresses and shoes in the various shops. For the Empress, buying dresses had always been her hobby. 3 days later, the two of them returned to Dayo with a pile of white boxes. The next day, early in the morning, the sky was still bright. The road from the entrance of Hongwu's residence all the way to Ping City's southern gate was covered in layers of white fog. Walking on it was like walking on clouds. It was a road that was covered with mist. Everyone who woke up early and saw this scene was surprised. They didn't know what was going on, but both sides of the road were blocked by people who didn't allow anyone to walk on it. Some people tried to fish at the edge of the road, but they couldn't find anything. The dense mist on the ground didn't have any shape at all. After taking a closer look, they noticed that there were a few burly men on both sides of the road who were holding a strange object. The mist was coming from the front of this strange object. As the strange object emitted colorful rays of light, the mist became colorful as well. Only this rainbow mist road is worthy of your majesty. Rinpoche stood in front of Hongwu's residence, bowed slightly, and pointed his arm outside. At this moment, looking from the inside, the ground outside was covered with a layer of colorful clouds. The mist slowly rose and dissipated, making it look like a fairyland. The Empress's eyes lit up as she looked at everything outside. Although she had thought about what the rainbow clouds that Rinpoche mentioned looked like, she didn't expect it to be like this. It was like a road paved with clouds. There wasn't a woman who wouldn't be affected by such a scene. It was a huge surprise. Rinpoche took a step forward, held the Empress's fingertips, and let her out. When they stepped into the mist, they could feel that the temperature here was much colder than other places. However, it felt more real than not feeling anything. Rinpoche led the Empress on this mist road, and the two of them walked toward the south gate. After the two of them left, the people at the back turned off the smoke mechanism. The mist on the ground soon began to dissipate, revealing the flagstone road below. From afar, it looked like a road made of clouds was prepared for the two of them. As the two of them moved forward, the mist behind them began to dissipate, and the road shortened. Quickly come out and see the deities. What deities? Where are the deities? Many people who were affected by the noise outside opened their windows and looked out. When they saw the road paved with mist and the two people on it, they were immediately speechless. Along the way, the Water Empress's eyes were sparkling and filled with surprise. She also had a smile on her face. When she walked to the city gate and looked back, the mist behind her had already begun to dissipate. Hongwu and the others were also rushing over. Rinpoche leaned his head over and gently pecked the Empress's red lips. The Empress's eyes sparkled as she looked straight at him. There was something surging in her eyes. It was rare that she didn't dodge. The soft touch and faint sweetness made Rinpoche's heart ripple. It was a pity that the time and place weren't right. Otherwise, Rinpoche would really like to continue like this. At the city gate, a man and a woman were kissing in the mist, and they immediately pulled back. The surrounding guards all received tons of damage and looked up at the sky. Chapter 397. Wu Shengho is dead. Great Xia has retreated. Outside Sanchi City, in a huge tent in the Yun Nation's military camp, a middle-aged man cried out after reading the contents of the letter in his hand. This man was the commander of the Yun Nation's Western Army, Zhu Wuzhen. The Yun Nation only received the news half a month after Great Xiao retreated. When Wu Shengho died, the Yun Nation didn't receive the news yet. However, Great Xiao's retreat couldn't be kept a secret. Zhu Wuzhen's expression was uncertain. Now that Great Xia had retreated, it would be troublesome for the Yun Nation to send out their troops. If the Yun Nation was of one mind and deployed their elite soldiers, Dayo would still stand a chance against them given the current situation. However, those people in the imperial court made him feel a chill just thinking about it. Without the skin, where would the hair attach to? They understood this simple logic. However, to them, internal strife and their own calculations were obviously more important than external threats. Previously, it was still all right when Great Xia distracted Dayo. Now that Great Xia was gone, he also had the idea of retreating. Then, he saw the second letter, and his expression changed drastically. First, he was enraged, and he slammed his palm on the table. A palm-shaped hole appeared on the table, and the place where his palm had been had turned into wood dust. After a while, his anger dissipated, and he smiled bitterly. In such a situation, they actually told him that they couldn't retreat. Wasn't this clearly making Great Xia a scapegoat? He wondered which official in the imperial court had received a lot of money from Great Xia to make such a decision. Did they really think that without Great Xia, the 180,000 soldiers from the Western Army and those miscellaneous soldiers could stop Dayo? What a joke. His only hope was that the Chun nation would send out their troops as soon as possible. Ren Baqian and the Empress had just arrived in Liao City when it started to rain. It continued to rain for 3 days. During these 3 days, Ren Baqian and the Empress sat in the room, each holding a small wine glass and staring blankly. "Is the rainy season here?" Ren Baqian asked while playing with the wine glass in his hand. "Almost," the Empress replied casually. According to the seasons, it would be the rainy season from now until September, and the rest of the time would be the dry season. There were no 4 seasons. In Dayo, there were only 2 seasons, the rainy season and the dry season. Liao City was located in the north, so the rainy season came slightly later. Ren Baqian looked at the drizzle outside the window and racked his brains to come up with a poem. During the yellow plum blossom season, every house is raining. "Not bad," the Water Empress said calmly. She didn't know much about poetry, but it sounded pretty good. "There are better ones." Ren Baqian immediately laughed. "Tell me about it." The Empress became interested. "Heavy rain, you are full of water. A fine horse with 4 legs. See swallows." Ren Baqian's voice was full of emotion. "Pa." With a flick of her chopsticks, a piece of meat on the plate landed on Ren Baqian's face. "Thank you for the reward, Your Majesty." Ren Baqian chuckled, stuffed the piece of meat into his mouth, and wiped his face with a rag. The Empress ignored him, drank a glass of wine, and threw a piece of chocolate into her mouth. Using chocolate to go with wine was quite creative. However, Ren Baqian recalled a type of wine chocolate that he had eaten when he was young. He reckoned that the Empress would like it very much. After staying in Liao City for 3 days, the weather finally cleared up, and everyone set off again. It had just rained, and the dirt road was uneven, so they couldn't speed up. Moreover, they encountered heavy rain after just 1 day of walking. Ren Baqian sneaked into the Empress's carriage to avoid being drenched. In fact, there were 2 other ox carts carrying food and daily necessities, as well as Lin Xiaola, who hadn't woken up since she boarded the carriage. However, the important thing wasn't which carriage, but who was in it. While listening to the sound of raindrops hitting the carriage, Ren Baqian resumed his old hobby and told the Empress a story called A Chinese Ghost Story. The story began with a heavy rain. Ning Kaichun, who was on his way to Guobei County to collect debts, encountered a rainstorm and hid in the legendary Lanrua Temple. Ning Kaichun? I seem to have heard of him somewhere. The name sounded familiar to the Empress. He was there during your birthday celebration. Later on, he came again to deliver a person. Oh, I remember now. It's him. Continue. The Empress thought that the story happened to Ning Kaichun and didn't think much about it. It's just the same name. He didn't experience it personally. Rinpoche pointed it out. Otherwise, when Yin Qixia, Granny Tree Demon, Old Demon Black Mountain, and the others appeared, the Empress would be confused. Next, everyone walked in the mud while Rinpoche told the Empress about strange stories from a Chinese studio. Sometimes, the wheels of the ox cart got stuck in the mud, but a guard could lift it out with a lift. This didn't delay the journey. However, the speed of the journey was inevitably reduced. It's hard to walk. Rinpoche, who had just finished telling the painted skin, sighed in the carriage. This journey was indeed difficult. It wasn't the rainy season when they came, so it wasn't that troublesome to walk. However, on their way back, this kind of road was simply torture. Every step they took was filled with mud. The guards outside were like mud balls. Can that kind of cement be used to repair roads? The Empress asked as she looked at the muddy road outside. If you want to get rich, you have to repair roads first. It's time to repair roads first. Cement will do, Rinpoche said as he looked at the road outside. That's good. Fortunately, Great Xia didn't attack at this time. Otherwise, our marching speed would be greatly reduced. Rinpoche smiled. Great Xia's bowstrings can't be used during the rainy season, the Empress explained. Only then did Rinpoche realize that the bowstrings were mainly made of animal tendons and would become soft after being soaked in water. Even if they weren't blistered, the bowstrings would become soft after using them for a while in such a humid environment. It seemed like Great Xia had deliberately attacked a while ago. However, repairing roads requires a lot of manpower and material resources. Next, it will depend on the Protectorate of the Northeast, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. There were no machines or cars in this world. Everything depended on manpower. Transportation also depended on fork-horned cows and humans. The amount of labor needed to repair the road was huge. In ancient times, people on Earth used laborers. Dayo didn't have laborers, so they had to think of a way to solve the labor problem. It was impossible to hire laborers, as Dayo's imperial court couldn't afford it. Also, there weren't that many aboriginals to do this. Therefore, they decided to target the Yun nation. When the time comes, I will tell Zi Donglai to capture more people alive. The Empress nodded. In any case, they have 400,000 soldiers, Rinpoche reminded the Empress. The 400,000 soldiers of the Yun nation can't even compare to the 200,000 soldiers of Great Xia. If there's anything worth praising, it's that the Yun nation's military equipment is pretty good. However, no matter how good the military equipment is, it still needs people to use it, the Empress said softly. According to the schedule, those new soldiers still need another 2 months, but I will let them set off in another month. Now that Great Xia was crippled, these 20,000 new soldiers could be transferred to the Protectorate of the Northeast. After that, there would be another batch of 20,000 new soldiers who would be trained and transferred to the Protectorate of the North. At present, the 180,000 soldiers of Great Xia wouldn't be able to cause too much trouble in a short period of time. It's all thanks to those things of yours. The Empress glanced at Rinpoche. If it weren't for those mortars, grenades, binoculars, walkie-talkies, and radios, Great Xia might have been able to win this war. The mortars and grenades could disrupt the enemy's formation. The binoculars and drones could monitor the enemy's situation at any time. Any movement of the enemy's troops could be detected. The walkie-talkies and radios were even more useful. The various armies could directly communicate with each other and be informed of the situation. Orders were transmitted in real time, and the movements of various units in battle were more timely and accurate. Chapter 398. The welcome for the Empress this time was much grander than the previous one. After all, it only took slightly more than a month for them to repel Great Xia's attack. All the residents of Lan City were full of pride. This was their Empress. Therefore, when they found out that the Empress had returned, they scrambled to see the Empress with their own eyes. From the city gate to Beihang district, there was a sea of people on both sides. Although it was drizzling, it couldn't stop the enthusiasm of the residents of Lan City. Your Majesty, it's Her Majesty. Your Majesty's martial arts are prosperous. All kinds of cheers came from the crowd on both sides. The curtain in front of the Empress's carriage was pulled open, allowing people to see the Empress in red lying on her side. Just like the first time Rinpoche saw the Empress, she was lying on her side on a thick fur without a smile. Her eyes were gently closed while Hongwan and Qing Yuan followed behind her. Although she wasn't sitting in a very dignified manner, this image was in line with the people's impression of the Empress. Rinpoche obediently followed behind on his four-corned cow, and it was inevitable that people would point at him. Due to the existence of the radio station, the situation in the north could be transmitted to Lan City every day. Then, it was spread to the residences of the officials, and then to the ears of many commoners. Every day, before and after tea, on the streets and in the alleys, all of Lan City was discussing the war in the north. Many things that happened during the war were also spread. As a result, although Rinpoche was still a pretty boy, many people heard that he had done a lot of things during the war with Great Xia. This caused many people to look at him differently. At least he wasn't like a fresh flower stuck in a mosaic. He had almost improved to the point of a fresh flower stuck in cow dung. This progress was gratifying. Rinpoche turned his head to the side and happened to see a few heads squeezed in front of a window. They were all his students. Rinpoche smiled at them, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Yagwei saw us. Those students subconsciously shrank their heads back. Du Laolu, have you finished your homework? What's there to be afraid of? Since Her Majesty has returned from such a great victory, she will definitely hold a banquet in the palace and have other things to deal with. Yagwei definitely won't start school, so soon, and we'll have time to do it. Du Laolu patted his chest and said in an imposing manner before turning to look at the others. What about you? I haven't done it yet. Several students were like Du Laolu. During the war in the north, they had been talking about the war in the tavern every day and exchanging information they had heard from their parents. How could they be in the mood to do their homework? Du Laolu's gaze drifted over everyone, feeling somewhat disappointed. Although he said it straightforwardly, even if school started a few days later, he wouldn't be able to finish his homework even if he stayed at home every day. At that time, he would probably be shot again. Out of all the students, he had been shot the most. Although the wounds would heal after applying the black mud ointment, there were still patches of tender skin that were different from before. Now, he didn't even dare to bare his upper body. After taking off his clothes, his arms and shoulders were covered with finger-sized white spots. Those who didn't know better would think that he had a skin disease. I've done most of it, someone finally said. Everyone's eyes were on that person. Brother, whether we live or die is up to you, Du Laolu said as he hooked his arm around his brother's neck. A bunch of trash. A little lowly walked down from upstairs with a look of disdain. Have you finished your homework? Everyone's eyes lit up. Oomph. The little lowly proudly raised her head and walked down the stairs, ignoring everyone's envious gazes. After leaving the tavern, she drooped her head and went straight to the Tong residence. After returning home, she was in a mess. Then, she gritted her teeth and started to do her homework. When Rinpoche returned to Pingle Park, he immediately saw two black and white round fellows. One of them was lying on the ground while the other was stepping on it and climbing up a tree. Almost a year had passed, and the two little fellows had grown up quite a bit. Rinpoche walked over, and the two little fellows looked at him. Then, Rinpoche dragged the panda on the bottom out, and the one on top couldn't stand anymore and immediately fell down. Rinpoche laughed heartily, hugged the furry panda, and rubbed his face against it. It had a familiar smell. The other panda rolled on the ground, ran over with its mouth open, and tried to push him away. In the end, it was gently pushed by Rinpoche, causing it to tumble and cry out in grievance. Rinpoche rubbed the two pandas, returned to the house, and looked around. There wasn't much dust. It seemed like someone had been cleaning the house after he left. Then, he fell onto the bed. He was finally home and could finally sleep on the bed. Long-distance travel in this world was simply too troublesome. When Rinpoche was woken up, it was almost dark. He stretched and felt much more comfortable. Sir, Her Majesty wants you to attend the banquet in a while, Shurha reported. Everyone in the imperial court is going. Yes. Rinpoche thought about it. It seemed like he only had his previous robe. Her Majesty asked someone to rush out a new robe for you. I reckon it will be delivered soon. Sure, who said? Get someone to boil the water. I'll take a bath first. After he was done bathing, the robe was delivered. With his current official position, his robe was purple with beautiful embroidery of birds and beasts. It looked much better than his previous robe. The last time he attended the banquet, Rinpoche sat at the end. If not for the Empress's special permission, he wouldn't have been qualified to attend. This time, his seat was slightly higher in the middle. He sat together with Feng Ho and a few officials from the Ministry of Works. Below him were Feng Ho from the Department of Ordnance and Gu Yihong from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. Above him were the 6 ministers, the Great Elder, and the Young Elder. Rinpoche received a lot of attention the moment he came in. There were also a few people who greeted him, and they were all officials from the Ministry of Works whom he had dealt with before. As for the other ministries, the Ministry of War treated him rather kindly. Other people didn't know what effect the things that Rinpoche had on the front line had, but the people from the Ministry of War were very clear about it. Furthermore, his idea of a militia had satisfied the people from the Ministry of War. As a result, they showed their goodwill when they saw him. For example, sneering at him. If he didn't know better, he would have thought that they were going to beat him up. Sir Ren, you have worked hard on this trip. Just as Rinpoche sat down, Feng Ho came in and sat beside him with a smile. To serve the people, Rinpoche was very polite. Feng Ho, what the hell was this? How's the blast furnace? Rinpoche asked. It's still under construction. There's been a lot of rain these days, so the construction has slowed down quite a bit. Feng Ho said. The rainy season came earlier in Lan City, and it had been raining continuously these days. Even the speed at which the cement was fired had been slowed down. As a result, by the time Rinpoche returned, the progress of the blast furnace was only half done. Now that he had achieved hydraulic hammer forging, it was much easier, and the speed at which he forged weapons was much faster. But the blast furnaces were only half built, and now the iron was not enough to keep up. Rinpoche chatted with Feng Ho for a while before the 6 ministers came in one after another. Following them were the Great Elder and the Second Elder. After everyone was seated, the Empress walked into the hall. We welcome your Majesty and congratulate your Majesty on your triumphant return. Everyone stood up and bowed. Have a seat, the Empress said faintly and sat down at the seat of honor. She then said, Today, we're not going to talk about national affairs. We're just here to celebrate. Dance. As soon as the Empress finished speaking, 6 strong men and 6 women entered the hall. The men were wearing leather shorts, while the women were wearing tube tops and leather skirts. As the fast-paced drums sounded, the 12 people began to dance a primitive dance in the hall. Many of their movements were similar to hunting, and their mouths were full of energy. Ha! Ha! Their voices were full of wildness. Following that, the sound of Insun was heard, adding a touch of desolation to the wildness. It was as if they were in the endless wilderness. This is a celebratory dance. In the past, when we were in the village, we would dance this kind of dance if we hunted a lot or defeated an enemy. Feng Ho explained in a low voice. He knew that Rinpoche didn't understand this dance. Rinpoche nodded. This kind of primitive dance was interesting and full of vitality. As the dance ended, a few middle-aged women played instruments that looked like pipas. The atmosphere in the hall immediately became cheerful. Starting from the Great Elder, the ministers also began to toast the Empress. The hall was full of joy and harmony. Until 1 hour later, following that, a loud shout was heard. Ignorant Tong, what did you say? Do you want to have a taste of the sharpness of my saber? Come, come, come. Today, I will teach you a lesson. Following that, Tong Jingye's voice was heard. Following that, there was a series of banging sounds. Tong Jingye and Qin Chuan directly flipped the table and jumped to the center of the hall. Tong Jingye used Black Tiger Steals Heart. Qin Chuan used Monkey Steals Peach. Tong Jingye used Black Tiger Steals Heart. Qin Chuan used Black Tiger Steals Heart. And I used Black Tiger Steals Heart 3 times in a row. Qin Chuan used Fishing the Moon from the Bottom of the Sea 4 times in a row, 5 times in a row. There were even people at the side who were cheering loudly. Lord Tong's attack came at just the right time. It interrupted Lord Qin's accumulation of power and forced him to defend. Lord Qin fell into a disadvantageous position after losing one move. Lord Tong attacked again at this moment, forcing Lord Qin to retreat. Feng Ho evaluated from aside. His voice wasn't soft either. Ren Baqian was embarrassed. How could you see so much about Tong Jingye's Black Tiger steals heart 13 times in a row? Feng Ho, you're spouting nonsense. Someone at the opposite table immediately shouted out. Following that, plates and cups flew toward Feng Ho. Ren Baqian looked at the situation and quickly crawled to the side. He then heard a series of crashing sounds behind him. By the time he crawled behind a pillar, Feng Ho had already started fighting with a burly man from the Ministry of War. Then plates and bowls started flying on both sides of the hall. Ren Baqian stretched out his hand and caught a pork knuckle in the air. When he took a closer look, he didn't know who had taken 2 big bites. After thinking for a while, he threw the pork knuckle away. Sir Ren, sit here. Shi Qing, who was not far away, waved at him. Ren Baqian only took 2 steps before he stopped. He saw a huge figure flying toward Shi Qing, knocking him and the table to the ground. Tong Jingye got up from the ground, picked Shi Qing up, and put him on the ground. He looked around, and his eyes lit up. He picked up the table that Shi Qing had knocked over and threw it at Qin Chuan. Seeing this, Ren Baqian felt that it was better for him to stay here. He turned to look at the Empress, only to see her sitting at the seat of honor and drinking by herself as if she didn't see anything. The people below were in such a mess, but the Empress was still so calm. Chapter 399. The capital of the Yin nation, Wangjing, was said to have been established by a demoted prince of Great Xia in the previous dynasty. At that time, the location of the Yin nation was a desolate and uninhabited land. It wasn't until a long time later that all kinds of sinners, peasants who fled from famine, and all kinds of talents formed a nation in that area, and Wangjing became the imperial capital. After that, the people of that nation merged with the aboriginals in the south and established the predecessor of the Qin nation. The original Han nation was established by an army and aboriginals who fled from the previous dynasty. Later, Great Xia replaced the previous dynasty, and the Yun nation also killed all the royal family of the previous dynasty. The aboriginals overthrew the Han nation. This change of dynasty finally resulted in the current situation. Wangjing was considered a super city in this era with a population of over 1 million. Merchants from all over the world gathered here. Even some merchants from Great Xia said that compared to the imperial capital of Great Xia, Wangjing was more likable. At least it wasn't as dull. Wangjing was most famous for its flower boats on the Sanhua River. Hundreds of giant boats on the vast river were brightly lit throughout the night. Music and laughter reached the shore. Every place was a money-squandering den. Next was the east of the city. Almost half of the city was filled with all kinds of shops. Merchants from all over the world came and went, and there were even people from the sea who came to purchase goods. Prosperous, befuddled, and indulging in a life of luxury. This was the evaluation given by everyone who visited Wangjing. There was even a story about the son of an island owner who didn't want to go back after coming to Wangjing. He even gave up his position as the island owner just to live a carefree life. This was widely spread in the Yun nation and made the people of Wangjing feel proud. There was also the envoy from the Qin nation who didn't change for decades. The emperor of the Qin nation once asked him if he wanted to return home, but he replied, "I'm willing to stay here for the rest of my life." From these 2 incidents, one could get a general idea of Wangjing. It was a place where people were truly addicted to. However, the atmosphere in Wangjing had somewhat changed these days. Even the lingering music from the musical instruments that sounded like lovers' whispers had lessened. Instead, there were more drum sounds and 3-stringed zither sounds. There was a lot more murderous intent in the air. Those young masters who were jealous of each other in the past were no longer talking about romance. Instead, they were talking about military affairs. The Yun Nation's attack on Dayo this time was considered by the people of the Yun Nation as revenge. They wanted to avenge the country that was almost destroyed decades ago. Although these young people had not experienced that scene, they all felt that it was a disgrace. Now that they had mobilized their troops to attack, it was time for them to show their country's might and take revenge. All of them were in high spirits as they discussed when they could break into Dayo. A blind musician on a fancy boat shook his head. He did not understand the national affairs, but he knew that these young masters were underestimating Dayo. He didn't know much about Dayo, but he had lived for a long time. At that time, he wasn't blind yet and had seen with his own eyes how terrifying those barbarians were, not only on the boats, but also on the streets and alleys, as well as among the traveling merchants. Many of them were discussing the war. The Yun Nation had been peaceful for too long. This time, they sent troops to attack the enemy that almost destroyed the Yun Nation. Most people in Wangjing were focused on this war. There were also people who were keenly aware of the undercurrents surging in the Yun Nation. Or it could be said that someone had already sensed it a year ago, or even longer. As a result, a few people from the Zhang family went to Lan City to look for an opportunity to get in touch with Dayo. Unfortunately, the Aboriginals still strongly discriminated against foreigners. Although an outsider was chosen by the Empress as a husband, they still couldn't find any opportunities. They brought gifts to all the residences in the imperial court, but were met with disdain and rejection. Most of them were chased out by the gatekeepers before they even saw the owner of the gifts. The ordinary people in Wangjing only knew that there was a war against Dayo, and everyone was looking forward to the news of victory. What they didn't know was that recently, the Western City Army had sent 7 memorials at top speed. 3 of them stated the severity of the situation and suggested a retreat, but they were all suppressed. The last 4 memorials asked for money, food, manpower, and ordnance. The first 3 memorials were about Zhu Wuzhen doing his best. The last 4 memorials were about knowing that the imperial court had already made a decision and thinking of ways to increase their odds of success. Moving the North Army to the west. Now that he has 400,000 soldiers, isn't that enough? There are also the newly developed box crossbows. Against 15,000 barbarians, he still needs manpower? More than one person felt incredulous after seeing the memorials sent by the Western City Army. With 400,000 people, even if one of them pissed, they would be able to destroy Sanchi City. Furthermore, the North Army had other uses. Taking the opportunity of attacking Dayo and taking back the authority of the warlords, how could they send the North Army to the west? Tell him that he will only send other reinforcements when there is progress in the war. The Western Garrison Army broke their legs from running around in Wangjing. In the end, they only obtained another 20 ballistae. In addition to the previous ones, they had a total of 60 ballistae. Each ballistae could fire 132 bolts in one round. This was the latest military equipment developed by the Yun Nation. The Western City Army walked out of the yamen and spat unwillingly. They had no choice but to go back and report to the commander while cursing. This bunch of bastards. 400,000 soldiers? What use was the coalition army of the warlords? Only the 180,000 soldiers of the Western City Army were useful. However, they were going to attack the city now. The 15,000 barbarians were equivalent to at least 150,000 soldiers. Even a fool knew that attacking a city required at least a few times the number of soldiers. Now that the ratio of military strength was almost 1-to-1, even if the Western City Army was drained of blood, they might not be able to take down Sanchi City. After receiving the news, Zhu Wuzhen pondered for a night and wrote another letter. There is a saying in the art of war: surround the enemy 10 times, attack 5 times, and divide the enemy. A month ago, Great Xia besieged Ping City and Shun City, but did not attack. Zhu Wuzhen first elaborated on the art of war, but this time he didn't want the North Army. Instead, he wanted the cities to continue sending reinforcements. In the letter, he first explained that it was impossible to attack Sanchi City with the current military strength. Even the 700,000 soldiers of Great Xia besieged Ping City and Shun City, but did not attack. Instead, the Western City Army went straight in. Since he couldn't send the North Army, he wanted the cities to continue sending reinforcements. With at least 200,000 reinforcements, he could besiege Sanchi City and split some of his troops to attack Dayo. If Sanchi City sent reinforcements, it would be in line with his intentions. Whether it was besieging the troops or continuing to attack Sanchi City, it would achieve the desired effect. They could advance and retreat at will, and were in an invincible position. If Sanchi City didn't send troops to attack, it would be like Great Xia and mainly destroy Dayo's fields and villages. If most of the fields and pastures in the north and east were destroyed, Dayo's harvest this year could be imagined. When the Qin nation sent troops, it would be a pincer attack. There was danger outside and a famine inside. Naturally, Dayo wouldn't be able to withstand it. As the combat strength of the city's armies would be reduced when they joined forces, most of the warlords' armies would be sent into Dayo. Military merits would be calculated according to the number of enemies killed. Even the commoners would be counted as aboriginal soldiers. For Zhu Wuzhen, this was the best method he could use at present. Since the imperial court didn't want to send the North Army and wholeheartedly focused on the warlords, he would help them. If 300,000 warlords were thrown into Dayo, even 300,000 ants will be able to bite a few people to death, let alone 300,000 soldiers. When the time came, the cities would act on their own. This would prevent the result of not increasing, but decreasing their combat strength. Military merits would also be calculated for the commoners, and there would be no need to worry about them not contributing. It would be best if they could lure the aboriginal soldiers out of Sanchi City. Even if they couldn't, they could still create a lot of trouble for Dayo. As he said, as long as the fields of Dayo were destroyed, there would definitely be a famine in Dayo this year. Even if the Yun nation couldn't win this war, it wouldn't be defeated even if they didn't win on the battlefield. Even if they didn't win on the battlefield, as long as they could drag down Dayo, it would be considered a victory. He would continue to do what Great Xia hadn't finished. He was using Wu Shengho's method to bully Dayo's small population. No matter how strong Dayo was, there were only so many soldiers. As long as they attacked more, they would be able to make the other party lose focus and reveal flaws. At present, the imperial court was thinking about how to weaken the cities. Zhu Wuzhen's request could be said to be in line with everyone's wishes. Just as he expected, the imperial court immediately agreed. Chapter 400. In the imperial court, the Empress took out 2 bright red, rectangular, flat, and fine bricks from the side of the throne. With a wave of her hand, one of them flew out, followed by the other. One of the officials from the Public Order Bureau and the Department of the Army, who were fighting below, was hit on the head by a flying brick. Then, the other was hit on the head by a flying brick. "Your Majesty!" Both of them stopped fighting, turned around, and cupped their hands toward the Empress. The Empress patted the dust off her hands and was very satisfied. This thing was really easy to handle. Whether it was the weight or the shape, it felt different when she threw it, and its accuracy was extremely high. It seemed like she had to carry a few more bricks with her in the future. Nowadays, bricks were still a rarity in Dayo. They were only used in glass factories, cement factories, and blast furnaces. Most of the commoners had never seen them before. It wasn't like Earth, where materials could be found anywhere. The militia is still under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War, the Empress said faintly. However, this name doesn't sound good. Change it. After the Empress returned, this was the first time she attended court. After settling some other matters, she raised the issue of the militia. In fact, this matter had already been carried out. Because of the urgency of the war, the cities and towns in the north of Dayo had basically been established. There was still no movement in other areas, and they were waiting for the Empress to come back and officially arrange this matter. Just now, the officials from the Public Order Bureau and the Department of the Army had quarreled over which department would be responsible for the militia. However, both of them weren't good with words, so they simply vented their hatred with their fists. Of course, even if one of them had sharp tongue, the result would still be the same. In addition to the two of them, Minister of War Qin Chuan and Minister of Justice Louis Dao were also staring at each other with a kill-you look. If the Empress didn't stop them, after the two officials were done fighting, it would be time for the two of them to put on a show. Qing thought for a while and said, "Since the people are the army, why don't we call it the militia? What's the difference from the militia?" The Empress looked at him sideways. "Why don't we call it the reserve army?" Qin Chuan suggested. It turned out that it was a mistake for the Empress to let these officials think of names. "Principal Ren, do you have any ideas?" After hearing 7 or 8 names in a row, the Empress helplessly looked at Ren Baqian, who was in the middle. It was rare for Ren Baqian to attend a court session. He personally witnessed 2 rank 4 officials fighting over a few words. Immediately, he understood why the Empress was so calm during the banquet. He was the only newcomer here, so he simply looked down and pretended to be daydreaming. Now that he heard the Empress call his name, Rinpochian had no choice but to step forward and say, "Why don't we call the city enforcement team?" Therefore, this militia should be under the jurisdiction of the Public Order Bureau. From its name, you can tell that it's a department under the Public Order Bureau. Bai Shiying immediately followed up on Rinpochian's words. Ugh! Rinpochian saw that everyone from the Ministry of War was staring at him. He reckoned that they were wondering which part of his body was more resistant to beatings. "Why don't we call them the guards?" Rinpochian quickly changed his mind. This time, it was the people from the Ministry of Justice who were glaring at him. "It's better for your majesty to decide on the specific name." After saying this, Rinpochian continued to look down. He made up his mind that it would be better for him not to attend court sessions for no reason in the future. If someone were to give him a beating one day, he wouldn't be able to reason with them. "Let's call them the guards, and they will be under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War. Depending on the size of each town, there will be 1,000 to 3,000 people. They will do what they are supposed to do. Every year, they will have 3 months of training. During the training period, they will provide food and weapons." The Empress made the final decision, following which Rinpochian continued to daydream. He only came back to his senses when he heard the words "court session is dismissed." After lunch, he summoned Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng, the 2 managers of the caravan. "Sir." In Pingle Park, Rinpochian was teasing the panda. He flipped Tian Tian on the ground with its belly facing the sky and scratched the area near Tian Tian's little penis. The panda was so angry that it opened its mouth to bite him, but Rinpochian pressed its head back with one hand. He realized that the panda didn't seem to like people scratching the area near its belly. Every time he scratched that area, Tian Tian and Gun Gun would bite him, but he didn't get tired of it. "You are here. How are your injuries?" Rinpochian finally let go of Tian Tian, who had been tortured by him for half a day. He raised his head and smiled. Tian Tian quickly got up and walked away while groaning. Its voice was filled with grievance. "Thanks to Sir, my injuries have mostly recovered," the 2 of them replied. "Well, the situation is chaotic now. There are battles everywhere. Both of you should rest for a while. At the same time, help me collect some things." "Sir, please speak." Rinpochian looked at the 2 of them. Perhaps it was because they had more dealings with people from other nations. The way they spoke was different from ordinary aboriginals. They were more polite and didn't speak as gruffly. Rinpochian returned to his room, took out a piece of paper, and handed it to the 2 of them. "Collect according to this. Collect 45 sets first." On the paper were the medicinal herbs that Rinpochian needed to practice martial arts. He needed 1 set every week for a medicinal bath. 45 sets could be used for 10 months. The 7,000 taels of gold that the 2 of them brought back was equivalent to 70,000 taels of silver, which was barely enough to purchase 50 sets. However, Rinpochian only allowed them to collect 45 sets. "The 2 of us will do our best." After the 2 of them looked through the paper, Tang Feng folded it and carefully kept it in his pocket. "You can split the rest of the money. After all, Her Majesty doesn't need hungry soldiers. However, the age and quality of the things that I want must be of the highest quality. Don't make any mistakes." "Thank you, sir." The 2 of them thanked him sincerely. Rinpochian had made a mistake and obtained 7,000 taels of silver. To the 2 of them, it was a huge sum of money. Naturally, their subordinates had to get some as well. Also, for those who died outside, they had to send some back home as well. Even so, this was still a big reward for everyone. You don't have to collect all the things in one go. However, send a batch back as soon as possible. I'm still waiting to use them. Ren Bachien waved his hand after he finished speaking. You may leave. After the two of them left, Ren Bachien sat in the garden for a while. He called the guards over and asked them to inform the students that school would start in 3 days. As the guards searched the houses one by one according to the addresses, it was a scene of chaos everywhere. When Ren Bachien wasn't around, they more or less missed school. After all, they could learn a lot of things that they had never heard before. However, when Ren Bachien returned, the image of him waving his gun and flying into a rage reappeared in everyone's mind, especially the damn homework. For the past 2 months, they had been playing wild. It was as if they had returned to the carefree days of drinking and fighting. Homework had long been thrown to the back of their minds. Did anyone inform you? There are still 3 days left. A few students gathered together with a bitter look on their faces. Don't mention it. How did time pass so quickly? It feels like we haven't even played for a few days, and Yagaway is already back. Do you know who has finished their homework? Now, homework was the most pressing issue. There were still 3 days left, and they wouldn't be able to finish it even if they burned the midnight oil every day. If they had a choice, they really wanted to borrow another 500 days from the heavens. Tong Lan seems to have finished her homework. I saw her the other day. Although she didn't say it, she seemed to have finished it. Someone immediately suggested, that little fellow might not lend it to us to copy, right? We have to try. With so many of us going together, I don't believe that she won't lend it to us. Go, go, go. An hour later, along with a few screams, the little Lolita, Tong Lan, clapped her hands and instructed the others, throw these piles of trash out. Then, she returned to her room and continued to do her homework while gnashing her teeth. The students of the Black Bamboo Academy began to rack their brains after Ren Bachien informed them of the school's opening date. Chapter 401. Jinyuan City wasn't considered a big city in Great Xia, but it had a population of tens of thousands. It was morning, and it was a little chilly in May. Dozens of people formed a long line in front of the gate. They could only enter after paying the entrance fee. There were farmers who wanted to enter the city with their own vegetables, hunters who brought along mountain delicacies, and a few people who were dressed in green robes and carried long swords. It was obvious that they were scholars who were out traveling. Is the earth dragon turning over? Someone shouted when he felt the tremors under his feet. Everyone revealed a panicked expression and wanted to run towards the open space. As long as the earth dragon turning over wasn't too serious, it would be safe as long as it was in an open space. More than a decade ago, an earth dragon turning over happened here. Thousands of people were buried in collapsed houses in the middle of the night. The people here still remembered it vividly. Don't panic, it's a cavalry, a knowledgeable scholar said with a smile. Ordinary people can't see a cavalry unit, so it's normal to have such a misunderstanding. Another scholar patted his shoulder and said, I can't compare to you two brothers. To be honest, I've never seen a cavalry unit. If you two didn't say anything, I'm afraid I would have thought that it was an earth dragon turning over. A thinner scholar cupped his hands in obeisance. Why would a cavalry unit come here at this time? The first scholar to speak was puzzled. His name was Li Mengyuan, and he was quite famous in his hometown. His uncle was a 5th-rank military officer. That's the imperial court's business. I think they're going to the south. The thinner scholar was obviously not interested in this. Jingyan, don't say that. The nation's business is the world's business. How can the world's business have nothing to do with us? When we enter the imperial court, we have to pay more attention to everything, Li Mengyuan warned. You're right, brother. Thank you for your advice. The thinner scholar cupped his hands in obeisance. His name was Yao Zhengyan. They turned their heads and saw a black line on the distant horizon, followed by a long earth dragon. I didn't expect Wu Shengho to be defeated. Other than Li Mengyuan and Yao Zhengyan, there was another scholar called Su Pingji. He was the one who sighed. I really didn't expect it. The imperial court has prepared for so many years. 700,000 soldiers and countless rations have all gone down the drain. Li Mengyuan shook his head. Are those Dao people really like what the legends say? Yao Xingyan asked. Now that Great Xia had lost the war, everyone on the streets and alleys were talking about Dao as if they were gods. According to the commoners, the people of Dao wore leather skirts, bared their upper bodies, and let out barbaric howls during battle. An ordinary soldier was 8 feet tall and could carry a rod that weighed a few hundred kilograms. With a swing of the rod, he could send a person flying. You've heard about it too? Li Mengyuan laughed. He had also heard of this rumor. It's not as exaggerated as the rumors say, but it's indeed powerful. Ordinary soldiers in Dao are at the man-wheel level, and they can even become team leaders in Dao. Even the commoners could attain the man-wheel level. Fortunately, there weren't many of them. The entire Dao had less than 100,000 soldiers. In addition, the officials were vulgar and did not understand military affairs or military equipment. That's why I've always been content with this one, Li Mengyuan explained. At this time, the transmission of information wasn't very advanced. Most of the information was based on falsehoods. Ordinary people knew very little about Dao. His family had a military background and knew a little more about Dao. That's still very powerful, Yao Xingyan replied after thinking for a while. He knew the strength of a man-wheel expert. An ordinary man-wheel expert would be able to make a name for himself wherever he went. In Great Xia's military system, 10 people formed a battalion and 5 battalions formed a team. A team leader would be in charge of 50 people. As long as a man-wheel expert joined the army, he would be in charge of at least 50 people. From this, one could see the status of a man-wheel expert in Great Xia. It was somewhat exaggerated that the commoners of Dao were all man-wheel experts. Do they eat people? Yao Xingyan asked again. Many people on the streets and alleys swore that the barbarians in the south ate people. He had been curious about this matter for a long time. Were there really people who ate people? Although the people of Dao were barbaric and backward, they were still human. Upon hearing this, Li Mengyuan frowned. After thinking for a while, he said, I'm not sure about this matter either. However, I think there might be a reason for this groundless rumor. Just as they were chatting, there was a sudden exclamation from the top of the city wall. It's the people of Dao. Close the city gate. Quickly close the city gate. At the same time, the sound of drums was heard from the top of the city wall and transmitted into the city. People of Dao? The 3 scholars were startled. They turned their heads and looked in the direction of the cavalry. Doubts emerged in their minds. This was the hinterland of Great Xia. Why were the people of Dao here? Could it be that the border was lost? Even if the border was lost, it was impossible for them to fight their way here so quickly, right? Nearby, there were anxious shouts from other people. Quickly let us in. After a while, the city gate slowly closed. Li Mengyuan pulled a guard who was running down from the city wall and asked, How many people are there? Can they defend? That guard was already anxious. After being pulled by someone, he couldn't shake him off even after trying twice. He realized that the other party was quite strong. Seeing that the guard was still a scholar, he replied, I don't know. All the people in the army have been transferred away. Now, there are only 1,000 people in the city. Upon hearing this, Li Mengyuan immediately let go of him. It's over. Li Mengyuan's face turned deathly pale. The other 2 also heard it clearly, and their faces turned pale. Judging from the dust raised by the cavalry in the distance, there are at least 2,000 to 3,000 people. Furthermore, Dao soldiers are at least at the man-wheel level. For the elite winged cavalry, only earth-wheel experts can enter. 1,000 people can't defend at all, Li Mengyuan muttered to himself. Previously, when Great Xia attacked the south, most of the soldiers in the country were transferred away. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any problems. After all, there were still some guards left in every city. However, now that Dao was here, the defensive line formed by these guards was too weak. It was as if it would be torn apart at any moment. Who's babbling nonsense? If you continue to mislead people with your lies, I'll behead you first. Not far away, someone scolded angrily. Li Mengyuan looked up and realized that the other party was dressed like a captain. He calmed himself down and apologized. Sorry, I was distracted for a moment. Although his face was pale, he managed to calm down. What do we do now? The other two looked at him. Let's find a place to hide first. Now that it's chaotic, we shouldn't stay outside. Li Mengyuan hurriedly pulled the other two into the city. Currently, the city was also in chaos. Hearing that Dayo was attacking, there were anxious shouts of adults and cries of children everywhere. There were also soldiers on horses galloping madly in the city, constantly shouting, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" Are we really unable to defend? Su Pingji whispered. It's difficult. Li Mengyuan shook his head. However, it's not that there's no chance. There should be many experts from the martial arts schools in the city. If we gather them together, they might be of some use. Li Mengyuan knew that even then, the chances were very slim. However, this was the only chance they had. If the two armies confronted each other, they wouldn't stand a chance at all. However, if they were to defend the city, they would more or less be of some use. If they were lucky, after the Dayo people realized that Jinyu City wasn't easy to deal with, they might turn to other cities. Those Dayo people probably didn't attack from the border. They might have come from the Liaoning mountain range. It's impossible for them to have siege equipment. How are they going to break the city walls? Su Pingji asked. That's why I said there's still a glimmer of hope. It all depends on whether the experts from the martial arts schools can stop the Dayo people from rushing into the city to open the city gates, Li Mengyuan explained. One had to know that the current city gates were usually made of a palm-thick wooden plank with 2 layers of iron plates. This was to prevent experts from breaking the city gates. Chapter 402. Stop. Following the order, thousands of hungry Aboriginal soldiers stopped 5 kilometers away from Jinyu City. They looked at the city, subconsciously licked their lips, and their eyes glowed. According to the plan, they should have attacked another city at least 7 days ago. However, the tragedy was that they actually went the wrong way. They were delayed for a full 7 days before they came out of the mountain range. If they hadn't caught a lot of wild beasts and picked some wild fruits, which somewhat delayed the livestock they brought with them, they would have had to kill their mounts to appease their hunger. Even so, thousands of people were so hungry that their chests were sticking to their backs. Their stomachs were rumbling, and they couldn't wait to attack the city in front of them to have a big meal. Li Qianxiu rode his 4-corn cow to the front of the troops. He looked at the top of the city with a pair of binoculars and saw terrified faces. He roughly looked at the number of people and immediately felt relieved. There were only a few hundred people at the top of the city wall. As expected, the interior of Great Xia was also empty, and there was nothing that could stop this army. The winged cavalry opened the city gate and arrest all those who resisted. The 1st and 2nd battalions will control the 4 city gates. The rest will collect food and livestock first. The rest will also gather at the magistrate office in the city. Li Qianxiu waved his hand. It wasn't difficult to attack this city. Even if there was some resistance, they weren't a match for the nearly 1,000 earth wheel winged cavalry warriors. The next step was to snatch food. Snatch food. Snatch food. Kill. Break the city. Kill. Following Li Qianxiu's order, the 1,000 winged cavalry warriors dismounted, held their sabers, and rushed toward Jinyu City in the distance. It took them less than 3 minutes to cover the 5 kilometers. Sparse arrows were shot from the top of the city wall. To these earth wheel-winged cavalry warriors, these arrows couldn't even disturb them. Many of them grabbed them with their bare hands and threw them back. Then, the figures jumped 7 to 8 meters with the help of a run-up, and with a single kick, they flipped over the city wall. 100 ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to defeat 1 winged cavalry warrior. Not to mention the current situation, where it was almost 2 winged cavalry warriors against 1 ordinary soldier. It was equivalent to 2 tigers staring at a little white rabbit. When the guards on the city wall saw these Dayo people actually jump up the city wall that was 10 meters high, their legs went soft and they couldn't move. Rays of saber gleam lit up. Screams of death could be heard coming from the city walls. A moment later, the city gate was opened. To this army, the resistance in the city was like a delicate little Lolita shyly pushing away a 2-meter-tall man who weighed 300 kilograms. "Enter the city," Li Qianxiu ordered. By the time everyone entered the city gate, the winged cavalry had already charged towards the magistrate office in the middle. Along the way, they encountered some resistance. The great Xia officials had gathered some famous martial artists in the city, but just as they gathered, the city gate was broken. Then, more than a dozen earth wheel experts faced nearly 1,000 winged cavalry warriors. At that time, their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. However, the winged cavalry didn't listen to their nagging and immediately slashed down with their sabers. In the end, only 2 of them managed to escape from the city. Of the 3,000 soldiers, half went to control the 4 city gates, while the other half began to loot everywhere. One by one, the winged cavalry warriors kicked open the tightly shut doors of the houses, glared at them, and shouted, "Hand over all the food." Those great Xia commoners were already scared to death. When their doors were kicked open, they were completely disheartened. In the end, they heard the burly man holding the saber say, "Hand over all the food." Trembling, they immediately put all the food in their houses into a bag and handed it over. Then, the burly man carried the food to the next house. The great Xia commoners were left to heave a sigh of relief after shutting their doors tightly. The small and Li Mengyuan and the other 2 were hiding and was not spared either. When there was a commotion in the courtyard, the 3 of them were in their throats. In the end, those Dayo soldiers actually snatched the food and left, leaving the 3 of them hiding in the room, dumbfounded. "They are here to snatch the food? Dayo doesn't even have food to eat? I've long heard that Dayo is a barren land, but I didn't expect it to be so poor." Yao Jingyan was a little dumbfounded. In the records of previous wars, there was never a rule that only food was taken after the city was breached. Most of them plundered wantonly, and many of them raped and pillaged. After a disaster, even if every family wasn't in mourning, they would at least be in mourning. Yet, these Dayo people came in and snatched the food. They didn't care about anything else and just left. This was really beyond his expectations. "I hope we will be safe this time." The other 2 were now focused on preserving their lives. Ever since they knew that Dayo was going to attack the city, the 2 of them had been worried. In the chaos of war, there was nowhere to run. If they were careless, they might lose their heads. Now that those Dayo people had snatched the food, it couldn't be any better. Before noon, the original magistrate's office was piled up with a huge pile of food. There were very few livestock. Most of them were chickens and ducks, and a small number were horses and cows. Most of them were coarse rice and other grains. From noon until late at night, the smoke in the magistrate's office didn't stop. Thousands of people ate lunch, dinner, and supper after dinner. Those coarse rice and other grains were really not of much use, as they could barely replenish their blood. If they needed to, 5 kilograms of meat, this kind of coarse rice would need 20 to 15 kilograms. Almost everyone had to eat half a pot to barely replenish their body's needs. However, as they moved, they soon felt hungry again. From afternoon until late at night, all the soldiers were in a cycle of eating, going out to scavenge for food, sending it back to the magistrate's office, eating, going out to scavenge for food, and eating again. The next day, dozens of scholars were captured in the city. Li Mengyuan and the other 2 were among them. The dozens of scholars were like livestock waiting to be slaughtered as they trembled in the middle. Surrounding them were tall and strong men holding gleaming steel sabers. Li Mengyuan and the others were ashen-faced. They didn't know what these Dayo people were going to do. "Distribute paper and pens to them. I'll speak and you guys write. Once you're done, I'll let you go," Li Qianxiu said in a deep voice as he stood on the steps in front of everyone. Only then did everyone feel a little more at ease. After the papers and pens were distributed, a few scholars sat cross-legged on the ground. The others followed suit and spread the papers on the ground. They sat cross-legged and prepared to write. Li Qianxiu took out a piece of paper and read from it. "Xiao Baichong is ruthless and tyrannical. For his own selfish reasons, he led troops to attack Dayo. Now he has suffered heavy casualties, and 500,000 Great Xia soldiers are buried in foreign lands. However, isn't Deo innocent for suffering this calamity? Great Xia has to compensate Deo for the funeral expenses, city repairs, farmland damage, mental damage, felling of trees, cleaning of garbage, and burying of corpses. A total of 105 million taels of silver. A life for a life, a debt for a debt, and compensation for damage is a matter of course. Xiao Baichong did something wrong, but didn't want to bear the consequences and refused to pay compensation. Deo will collect it ourselves. If you want to blame someone, blame Xiao Baichong. After Li Qianxiu finished speaking, he rubbed his head and cursed. What the F asterisk CK? What kind of nonsense is this? What are you looking at? Why aren't you writing? Li Qianxiu scowled at those scholars who were in a daze. If the monarch is insulted, the officials will die. You have insulted our monarch, so I'd rather die than write. The scholar threw his pen away, raised his head, and scolded. Drag him out and behead him. Where's his home? Behead him together. Li Qianxiu waved his hand, and that scholar was dragged out. I will take responsibility for my own actions and not implicate my family, that scholar cursed as he was dragged away. This is called reuniting your family so that you won't be lonely on the road. Li Qianxiu had a look of disdain on his face. You are really uncultured. How can you call yourself a scholar? With a flash of the saber, a person's head fell off, and fresh blood spurted out for several meters. Go and ask who captured him, where his home is, and send him and his family on their way. Li Qianxiu looked at the guards beside him and said to the crowd below, Principal Ren once said that the most important thing for a family is to be reunited. I deeply agree with this. Are you going to write or die? Seeing that scholar get beheaded, everyone felt sorrowful. This group of damn barbarians. Everyone cursed in their hearts, but they didn't dare to express it. No one wanted to test whether their neck was harder or the saber was sharper. Furthermore, this group of barbarians didn't just kill people, but also harmed their entire families. Such means made it impossible for them to resist. However, which was more important, life or integrity? For the majority of people, life was more important. They could only comfort themselves that even if they didn't write, someone else would. After a while, Li Qianxiu held the paper that he had written and said meaningfully, That's why the more books you read, the worse you are and the more timid you become. His words made everyone's faces turn red with anger. Half a day later, these pieces of paper were pasted all over the main locations of Golden City. Li Qianxiu had been plundering Golden City for 2 full days, and almost all the livestock had been gathered together. In addition, there was also a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry, and salt, which were all plundered from those shops and wealthy families. As for those small families, Li Qianxiu couldn't be bothered with them. He only needed to grab the most valuable things. Grabbing too many things will be detrimental to the operation. To the ordinary people of Golden City, this was a blessing in disguise. Find a few people who know the way and set off tomorrow. Li Qianxiu instructed the people beside him. This time, he wasn't going to take a detour. 2 hours later, Li Mengyuan and the other 2 appeared in front of Li Qianxiu again. Nowadays, most of the ordinary people had never been more than 50 kilometers away from Golden City. Li Mengyuan and the other 2 scholars were unlucky enough to fall into Li Qianxiu's evil clutches. Chapter 403. Have I seen you guys before? Li Qianxiu was puzzled when he saw the 3 emaciated people in front of him. In his eyes, the people of Great Xia were mostly emaciated. In other words, the aboriginals felt that the people of other races were as skinny as chicks. General, the 3 of us were the ones who wrote the notice just now. The 3 of them said miserably, According to what you Great Xia people say, the 3 of you are fated with us. Li Qianxiu was amused. The 3 of them couldn't cry, even if they wanted to. Fate my ass. Who wanted to be fated? You guys will set off with us tomorrow to lead the way to Yechi City. Do you know the location? Li Qianxiu asked in a deep voice. Great General, we really don't know. The 3 of them immediately shook their heads. They were supposed to lead the way. It was still reasonable for them to write the notice, but if it was proven that they were supposed to lead the way, the three of them would die a horrible death. Everyone in Yechi City would hate the three of them to death. The imperial court would definitely execute them to appease the commoners. They might even implicate their families. Oh, Li Qinshu nodded and casually said, "Take them away and execute them. General, spare us." The three of them broke out in cold sweat. Take them away and execute them. Li Qinshu ignored them. Since it was useless, he would just execute them. As for whether they really didn't know or not, he didn't care. "Sir, I will lead the way. I will go and inquire about Yechi City right now." Yao Jingyan struggled with all his might, but the burly man's hands were like iron pincers that rendered him immobile. His head was full of cold sweat as he shouted. He really hadn't been to Yechi City before, but he couldn't care less now that his life was in danger. "Oh, behead those two and leave this one," Li Qinshu said coldly. "Sir, I remember now. I have heard of Yechi City and know its approximate location," Li Mengyuan quickly shouted. "Sir, spare us. I remember now, too. I can find Yechi City." Su Pingji shouted. What did it mean for a scholar to meet a soldier? This was it. Regardless of what they were thinking, the other party simply ignored them and dragged them away to be beheaded. The three of them were really scared after seeing a bloody head in the afternoon. Li Qinshu sneered. That was why he hated these scholars. They were full of evil tricks and had no backbone. Nippon City was in the vicinity of Golden City, only one day away. The three of them even beat around the bush when begging for their lives, which made him look down on them. Hang the three of them on a pole and bring them with you tomorrow. If the three of them try anything funny, kill them immediately, Li Qinshu said before leaving. Not long after, 3 pillars were erected in the mansion, each with a person tied to it. The three of them were tied to the pillars and exposed to the cold wind. Their hearts were incomparably desolate. Right now, they really couldn't call for help from the heavens or the earth. Encountering such a group of death gods, the three of them had no way of dealing with them. If I had known, I wouldn't have entered the city in the morning. Li Mengyuan sighed as he was tied to a pillar. The three of them had stayed at a farmer's house outside the city last night and rushed into the city early this morning. They didn't expect to encounter such a thing. What do we do next? Su Pingji asked with a dark face. Let's take one step at a time. If we bring them to Nippon City, I'm afraid the three of us will go down in the history books and bear countless curses, Li Mengyuan lamented. After Li Mengyuan finished speaking, the three of them fell silent. The three of them were well aware of the situation. However, their heads were almost chopped off just now. If we don't lead the way, they will find someone else to lead the way. Yao Jingyan defended himself and the three of them. The three of them could comfort themselves, but the imperial court and the people of Nippon City wouldn't forgive them for this reason. Early the next morning, Li Qinshu let the three of them down and threw them into the group to travel with the rest. No one was afraid that they would escape. It would be a huge joke if these 3 scholars could escape from their hands. A day later, this army broke into Nippon City again, snatching food, snatching food, snatching food. It was a little different from what they had imagined before. Now, snatching food had become their main task. Nippon City was slightly smaller than Golden City. Even though the 2 warriors who had escaped from Golden City had come to inform them, they still couldn't stop the iron hooves of this army. In the blink of an eye, the city was breached. The only thing that annoyed Li Qinshu was that many of the wealthy merchants in the city had run away. Within 3 days, 2 cities were suddenly breached by the Dayo army. Great Xia was shaken. Xiao Bailong smashed countless cups in one day, spat out blood, and collapsed. He didn't need to ask to know what was going on among the people. However, he didn't have the military strength to stop this Dayo army that suddenly appeared. If this continued, he would probably be the only emperor who allowed the enemy army to roam freely in his country during his reign. How could he accept this? Your Majesty, this bird can speak. Ren Baqian carried the birdcage and ran to the Empress's hall excitedly. It wasn't strange for birds to speak. There were many parrots and mynas that could learn to speak. However, This bird was extremely intelligent and seemed to be able to think on its own, which made him feel strange. In the hall, the Empress resumed her life of curling up on the sofa and watching television dramas. When she saw Rinpoche coming over, she only took a glance at him before returning her gaze to her notebook. "When will my wine pool be built?" "I'm afraid it will take some time," Rinpoche replied. How many years would it take to fill up a wine pool with more than 600 kilograms of wine? It was better to think of ways to get some food to brew wine himself. "Come, give me a smile." Rinpoche squatted on the sofa, carried the bird cage, and poked the gray clown bird inside with his finger. "Smile my ass. Do you think I'm a prostitute who sells smiles? Why would I give you a smile? Can't you take a look at your silly behavior?" The clown bird opened its bean-sized eyes and scolded. Rinpoche's face turned black. This bird wasn't like this when he bought it just now. It was actually quite obedient and cute. "Damn it, I've been tricked." Rinpoche reached into the bird cage, pinched the bird that was flapping its wings and flying around, and exerted force with his thumb and index finger. Click! The entire world became quiet. Rinpoche threw the cage aside and cursed in his heart. Damn it! Did this silly bird really think that it was a master? The Empress turned her head and looked at him with a smile. "I saw it. This bird can indeed talk." Quality education. Nowadays, not only are people's hearts no longer ancient, but even birds' hearts are no longer ancient. Rinpoche thought about it and felt a little regretful. That bird was actually quite intelligent. Just based on its intelligence, he would definitely be able to train it well if he put a knife to its neck. It was a pity that he didn't have the chance to train it. Forget it. There were many interesting things in this world. "Your Majesty, do you want to go out for a walk?" Rinpoche asked the Empress. He had been out of the palace for the past 2 days when he had nothing to do. He first went to the Ministry of Works to discuss the blast furnace and the construction of the cement factory with Tongjinya. After all, the roads would be ready in a few days, and the cement factory had to be expanded first. When the cement factory was completed, everything would be ready, and all that was left was the labor from the Yun Nation. Apart from this, he wandered around the city and often saw some interesting things in the hands of some Aboriginal people, especially in the Uwala district. There were many interesting things in the stalls along the streets. He had just bought this little black bird from one of the Aboriginal people's stalls. "No, I still have to finish reading this." The Empress immediately rejected him and looked back at the laptop screen. Chapter 404. For the people in this world, this was the beginning of an ordinary day. However, for a small group of people, this day was a matter of life and death. For example, Yao Jingyin and the other two didn't say anything, but the news of them leading the way for Dayo spread like wildfire. As long as the Dayo people left, the fate of the 3 of them could be imagined. It was even possible for them to be divided and eaten. As a result, the 3 of them gritted their teeth and made a decision to rely on Dayo. They didn't ask for an official position, but only wanted to keep them safe. If possible, it would be best to bring their families away. Li Qinshu rubbed his chin after listening to the 3 of them. He didn't really care about this matter. It was just 3 cowards who were greedy for life and afraid of death. As for how to deal with them, he would wait until they returned to Dayo. At most, he would find a place to throw them away. In Dayo's territory, Great Xia wouldn't be able to stir up any trouble. It was fine as long as they could survive. Even if they died, they could only blame it on their bad luck. In addition to these 3 people, this day was also a matter of life and death for some other people. For example, the students of the Black Bamboo Academy. School reopened today. With dark circles around her eyes, Tonglan placed her homework into a small cloth bag and let out a long yawn. She hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights. However, in any case, she had finished her homework. She was more or less pleased with herself. At least, she would be able to watch those idiots get punished. She was Tonglan. How could she let those idiots laugh at her? She stood on the back of the 4-corn cow and left the Tong residence. She continued to look like she was fluttering in the wind, but her eyelids were fighting and closed after a while. Halfway through the journey, she lost her balance and fell from the 4-corn cow. She didn't display any of her usual nimble skills at this moment. Her brain seemed to be filled with lead as she fell straight to the ground. She shook her head and got up from the ground. This time, she was more or less awake. She nervously checked if her clothes were dirty before lying on the back of the four-corned cow and continued to doze off. Not long after, they arrived at the academy. Tonglan immediately pretended to be in high spirits and strode into the academy with dark circles under her eyes. As soon as she entered, she saw Ren Bachien looking at her with a smile on his face. Sinister smile. Tonglan labeled him in her heart. She snorted through her nose and entered the classroom. Ren Bachien looked at Tonglan, who had 2 dark circles under her eyes. She was obviously so tired that she was about to fall asleep on the ground, yet she still pretended to be energetic. He found it somewhat funny. This little loli was too fun. Despite his young age, he was extremely competitive and always displayed a prideful look, constantly reminding himself that he was a genius. After watching the little Lolita enter the classroom, Ren Bachien stood at the door for a while. Most of the students came with dark circles under their eyes. However, it was extremely rare to have dark circles like the little lolis. It was like smoky makeup. Those who knew that he was doing homework and staying up all night, but those who didn't would think that he was playing death rock. After all the students had arrived, Ren Bachien strolled back to the classroom and stood on the podium. I'm very happy to see you. Next, someone will be receiving my gentle guidance, Ren Bachien said with a smile as he looked at the room full of dark circles. Hand in your homework first. Those who haven't finished, stand at the door. Everyone looked at each other with complacent smiles on their faces, waiting for the others to stand at the door. No, not a single one. Everyone was sitting there, waiting for the others to stand at the door. This is beyond my expectations. I thought that more than half of the students would stand at the door. Ren Bachien looked down and was a little surprised. Not only was it beyond his expectations, but it was also beyond the expectations of the others. The little Lolita's eyes widened. How is this possible? That bunch of good-for-nothings actually finished their homework? Didn't they ask to borrow homework from her 2 days ago? One had to know that she had done half of it previously and had to work for 3 days and 3 nights to finish it. How could they possibly finish it? It's still not too late to stand at the door. If I find out that you haven't finished your homework and haven't stood up, you know the consequences, Ren Bachien reminded them. Still, no one stood up. All right, hand in your homework here. I will look at it when I go back tonight. Ren Bachien nodded. This was indeed a pleasant surprise. In any case, he was very satisfied that this bunch of fellows still knew how to do their homework. Next, he mainly reviewed the content that they had learned previously. He picked a few students to stand up and answer his questions. About half of them answered correctly. Ren Bachien hadn't seen them for a long time and was in a good mood. He didn't punish those who answered wrongly. After school, he instructed the students to move the homework away and get ready to go back. Teacher, what's wrong? Ren Bachien raised his head and asked. I heard that you went to the battlefield. Indeed. Ren Bachien nodded. How was the battlefield? Wasn't it exciting and made your blood boil? When the topic of the battlefield was brought up, this bunch of students were in high spirits. It was all right. You can go to the slaughterhouse and take a look. It's roughly the same feeling. Ren Bachien thought for a while and replied. He was somewhat worried on the way to the front line, but when he really arrived, he didn't have much to worry about. However, he had always been well protected and used all kinds of modern weapons to tease the enemies. He had never experienced the kind of close combat that they were looking forward to. They had asked the wrong person. Ren Bachien left with the homework, and the classroom immediately became lively. Yagüe won't fight with people at the front line. You have asked the wrong person. I heard that he killed many enemies, at least a few thousand. A few thousand? He would have to run even if 3 people came. Don't forget that Yagüe has a gun. I also heard that Yagüe did kill many enemies. I heard that he contributed a lot to this battle. Yagüe usually uses a small gun. He has a big gun that is bigger than a human and can kill at least a few hundred people in a minute. If he uses that thing, none of you will be able to escape. Is that true? Is it that powerful? That's why I said that you should learn well. You could do it too if you learn Yagawei's skills. How can you finish your homework? Tong Lan ignored the discussion of the others and ran to the 3 students who wanted to borrow homework from her. The 3 of them looked at Tong Lan and smiled proudly. That smile made Tong Lan want to press them against the wall. Seeing that Tong Lan's face was getting darker and darker, they didn't want to provoke her. This little girl would make a move when she was anxious. If she made a move, the 3 of them would be the unlucky ones. It's hard to say. The 7 of us wrote a part each and copied from each other. Tong Lan's face turned black when she heard this. She had worked so hard for so long, but they actually wrote a part each and copied from each other. When she thought about how she hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights, she immediately grabbed the table and slammed it on the 3 of them. Are you crazy? Bang! Crash! The 3 of them were slammed to the ground. Tong Lan dusted her hands and slipped out of the classroom. She went home to sleep. Rin Baqian leaned against the wall outside. When he saw Tong Lan, he smiled and said, "That's why it's said that it's very difficult for one person to do things together. You have to learn how to borrow the strength of others." Oomph. Tong Lan raised her head and walked out of the school. Seeing that Tong Lan had left, Rin Baqian returned to the classroom. The students immediately shut up when they saw him. Working together to accomplish something is indeed a good method. However, homework is an exception because it's a way to deepen your knowledge. Remember, the knowledge you learn is the same as your personal strength. It belongs to you and can be used for a lifetime. Money and status could be taken away by others, but these 2 things could not be taken away. Chapter 405. After teaching in school for a few days, Rin Baqian finally received the medicinal ingredients that the manager of the caravan had sent over. Most of the ingredients were easy to obtain, but there were 2 herbs that weren't available in large quantities. After searching all over Lan City, they only managed to find 6 of them. Next, they had to go to the southwest to purchase more, especially to send people to the 60,000 mountains. That was the base camp of the Aboriginals. In any case, Rin Baqian could finally continue his training. 7 herbs were enough for him to use for more than a month and could temporarily solve his urgent need. That night, Rin Baqian entered the visualization of wood. When he woke up from it, he felt extremely exhausted. He was already used to this feeling, but after resting for 2 months, he wasn't used to this kind of exhaustion. The next morning, Rin Baqian clenched his fists and finally felt an increase in strength. This feeling of strength growth was really good. However, when he saw Tong Lan in the palace in the afternoon, he immediately felt that the increase in strength was just an illusion. After getting a solid beating from Tong Lan, Rin Baqian said to Tong Lan with a serious face, "Your grandfather will always be your grandfather." Thump! Rin Baqian took a solid punch. With dark circles under his eyes, Rin Baqian continued, "Your teacher will always be your teacher. You must learn to respect your teacher." Oomph. The little Lolita snorted and looked at him with disdain. After today's training, Rin Baqian said to the Empress seriously, "Your Majesty, I think we need to change my opponent." An 8-year-old? The Empress looked at him with a funny expression. Rin Baqian was at a loss. Wouldn't it be a little too embarrassing if he couldn't even beat an 8-year-old? He absolutely believed that the Empress could find an 8-year-old genius who could beat him up. Why don't I change the palace guards to be my opponent? Rin Baqian thought about it and gritted his teeth. In any case, the palace guards would still be gentler than Tong Lan. After all, Rin Baqian still had his status. Furthermore, the palace guards might not be as strong as Tong Lan. Not only were they both at the earth wheel level, but the things that Tong Lan had learned weren't something that the palace guards could compare to. After all, Tong Jinye was a spirit wheel expert and had some tricks up his sleeves. Tong Jinye's Black Tiger Steel's Heart 13 combo had defeated Qin Chuan several times. Rin Baqian felt that the Minister of War was better at fighting than the Minister of Works. But in reality, Qin Chuan lost more than he won. "I will change it for you after you defeat Tong Lan." The Empress looked at the change in his expression. Her eyes curved into crescents, as if she was laughing in her heart. After a long time, he finally said this. "Your Majesty." Rin Baqian looked aggrieved. Work hard to defeat her. It doesn't sound good if you can't even defeat a 10-year-old child, the Empress added. Rinpoche felt that the Empress had poured a handful of salt on his wound. This was not only unpleasant to hear, but it was also embarrassing to say it out loud. Forget it, Tonglan it was. At least there were some benefits to fighting with her. Every time he stood next to her, he was taller than her, so he had a psychological advantage. If it were those burly guards, they wouldn't have any advantage at all. It was still sunny just now. Rinpoche sat in the chair beside the Empress and basked in the sun for a while. Then, the sky was filled with dark clouds. When Rinpoche and the Empress returned to the main hall, it began to rain heavily. Bean-sized raindrops smashed on the tiles and the ground, making pitter-patter sounds. Your Majesty, do you want to eat hot pot tonight? Rinpoche turned his head and asked after looking at the rain outside. Sure, the Empress nodded. She couldn't get enough of hot pot. Before the sky turned dark, the guards brought the ingredients for hot pot in the rain. Rinpoche and the Empress listened to the sound of the rain in the main hall. In front of them was a steaming hot pot, which felt very good. Rinpoche poured wine for both of them, raised his cup to the Empress, and downed it. Those people in the south are always dishonest. I just killed a group of them, and recently, I discovered that they are secretly colluding, the Empress said faintly as she drank the wine. He didn't know when she developed this habit of always talking about things while eating. Oh, Rinpoche nodded. This kind of thing had never stopped, but it became more serious after the war with Great Xia. What do you think? The Empress asked faintly. I will make a trip there, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. After all, it will take some time to settle these things. Just treat it as preparation for the Yun nation. However, it will be a pity that I won't be able to accompany your Majesty. In that case, you don't have to feel regretful. I will make a trip there too, the Empress said faintly. Your Majesty, you're going too? Rinpoche was slightly surprised as he didn't expect the Empress to actually go there. I want to see why they are still not satisfied after the imperial court has given them a peaceful life for decades, the Empress said. She was already tired of those people's petty tricks. If she hadn't promised them, she would have killed them long ago. Now that she was going there to settle things, she wanted to see what those people were like, what kind of life they were living, and whether the imperial court had mistreated them. What about the imperial court? Rinpoche asked. Previously, she went to the north because of the war, and it was an urgent matter. Now that the war had stabilized, it didn't seem appropriate for the Empress to abandon the imperial court and run to the south. With the elders and the radio station around, there won't be any delays, the Empress said indifferently. In that case, I still have to bring my students along. I'm afraid this trip will take some time, Rinpoche continued. Oh yes, Your Majesty, do you want to read your palm? I learned it from an old man when I was young, Rinpoche asked. Read your palm? Everyone's palm is different. You can tell a person's fate by reading their palm. This is a skill that has been passed down for thousands of years, Rinpoche explained. How do you read it? The Empress's curiosity was piqued by his words. Your Majesty, give me your hand. As Rinpoche spoke, he held the Empress's hand and opened it. Then, he used his other hand to touch her palm and squinted his eyes. He touched it once, then again, and again. The Empress's face was full of anticipation, and her eyebrows were raised, and her eyes were cold. Rinpoche coughed and said, In terms of fate, Your Majesty was born rich and noble. You are at the top of the world and have the fate of the human emperor. In terms of marriage, Your Majesty is already married without any twists and turns, and you will live to a ripe old age together. The Empress continued to look cold. She felt that she had been deceived by this guy in front of her. In terms of fortune, Your Majesty's fortune is unparalleled, and you are sitting on the wealth of the world. Although your fortune isn't considered good at the moment, this year is your lucky year. From this year onwards, Your Majesty's fortune will gradually increase, and you will be the wealthiest in the world. In terms of children, Your Majesty has 12 children. Slap! The Empress's ears turned red, and she looked at Rinpoche coldly. 12 children. Have 12 children? Just thinking about it was scary. Furthermore, it was difficult for the Aboriginals to have children. It was considered good for an average family to have 3 to 5 children. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so few aboriginals. At her level, it was even more difficult to have children. This bastard was indeed deceiving her. Rinpoche shook his hand with all his might, and his face was twitching. Yes, I have 12 children. Rinpoche took a deep breath and said, slap. The Empress's phoenix eyes widened. If she didn't have 12 children, then whose? Chapter 406. It was nighttime. Dark clouds covered the moon. Yin Nation, outside Qingfeng City. More than 20 people appeared not far from the city and looked at the city wall with torches in the distance. The leader was a huge man who looked like a small giant and carried 2 double-edged axes on his back. He was the one who led the attack on the 7th Prince of Great Xia. This time, he was still the leader of the operation to exterminate the Yun Nation's Guqing warlord and his family. The Department of Inspection was mainly in charge of covert matters. Among them, there was a department in charge of investigation, but this department seemed to exist in name only. Rather than investigating in secret, the Aboriginals might as well kidnap people and interrogate them. The other department was in charge of killing. However, the Empress was straightforward and would behead anyone she didn't like. As a result, they rarely had to do anything. On the contrary, they had to be mobilized twice in a year. Apart from practicing martial arts every day, they had nothing else to do. Her Majesty finally remembered them. There were only about 100 people in the Department of Inspection, and the weakest among them was at the earthwheel level. However, unlike the winged cavalry, who were good at charging and breaking through enemy lines, the people of the Department of Inspection were better at one-on-one combat, just like the practitioners of Great Xia. There isn't even a moon. It's a good time to kill people at night. Sir, when do we enter the city? Someone behind him asked in the dark. Do it quickly. Her Majesty said to exterminate his entire family, so we can't let anyone escape. Also, don't forget to ask for the location of the treasury. Hong Bao waved his hand and said, let's go. Subsequently, the group approached the city under the cover of the night and sneaked into the city while the guards were patrolling. At this time, it was already the hour of the sea. For people in this world who worked at sunrise and rested at sunset, it was already time to rest. However, there were also a few drunkards who rarely sought pleasure in the red light districts and willow alleys. They walked in the city at night, reeking of alcohol. The group chose dark and remote places to walk. After climbing over a wall, Hong Bao felt that something was wrong below. It seemed that someone was leaning against the wall and vomiting. Hong Bao adjusted his posture in midair and stepped down with both feet on the back of the person supporting the wall. With the weight of Hong Bao's huge body and the 2 huge axes on his back, the person under his feet stopped moving after making contact with the ground with a kacha sound. There were originally 2 people in the alley. One of them was vomiting, and the other was also drunk. In the end, a burly man suddenly descended from the sky and stepped on one of them. The other person was instantly stunned. His vision became clearer, and he opened his mouth and wanted to shout. However, Hong Bao's huge palm pressed his face against the wall, and his head was smashed like a smashed watermelon. Behind Hong Bao, more than 20 black shadows flipped over and landed on the ground with a dull thud. Pa! Only one person's voice was different from the others. Everyone turned to look at him. In the dim light, they could see a puddle of fresh vomit at his feet. As his feet landed on the ground, it splashed onto the others. The eyes of the surrounding people were overflowing with killing intent. Only that person had an innocent look on his face as he shrugged. Capture someone and ask him where the City Lore Mansion is. Hong Bao's voice made everyone restrain their urge to let him know why the flowers were so red. After all, the mission was more important. As the figures left, there was a dull sound of bodies colliding with each other in the alley. After a while, they arrived at a huge mansion. Kill them all. Remember to leave a few important people alive to ask about the location of the treasure house. Hong Bao waved his hand. Everyone drew their weapons and jumped over the wall into the courtyard. A few people on night patrol didn't have time to react and were beheaded by a figure who suddenly appeared from the dark. The sound of blood splattering and bodies falling alarmed people in the distance. Who is it? What's that sound? A few figures silently rushed in the direction of the sound, while the others scattered in all directions. Who is it? Ah! The miserable howl of the person who asked the question before he died alarmed the people in the mansion. Many people rushed out and were greeted by all kinds of weapons. What happened? Yiku, the warlord of Qingfeng City, heard the commotion outside and asked in a low voice, "Sir, it seems like there are assassins." Oh. Yiku nodded and didn't pay much attention to it. He had done too many things in his lifetime, and there were too many people who wanted to seek revenge on him. However, he was still safe and sound here. He was still confident in the defense of the mansion. In addition to the ordinary guards, there were dozens of man-wheel experts and 7 earth-wheel experts. This kind of strength was comparable to some of the middle-level aristocratic families in Great Xia. Until now, no one had been able to break through the defense to his side. Most of the assassins didn't even get to see his face before they were skinned and hung on the city wall. In his opinion, the assassination this time would be the same as the previous ones and would be resolved very quickly. Even though the miserable screams of the guards before they died were getting closer and closer. Aboriginals? Why are you guys here? 2 earth wheel experts appeared and blocked the way of the advancing crowd. When they saw figures that were much larger than ordinary people walking out of the darkness, they immediately exclaimed. 1, 2, 3. Just from what they could see, there were already 7 or 8 people, and there were still miserable screams coming from afar. At the very least, they were aboriginals. A life for a life, a debt to be repaid. A burly man holding a mace revealed his white teeth in the darkness. He looked like a wild beast and was full of malevolence. Kill! That burly man roared, jumped more than 10 meters, and smashed his mace. Just by looking at the power of the mace, the 2 earth wheel experts were horrified and didn't dare to block it. Boom! The mace smashed into the ground, and the flagstones below turned into countless gravel that flew in all directions. Although the 2 experts dodged the mace, they felt a chill in their hearts when they saw the other figures that jumped over. Earthwheel experts, they were all earthwheel experts. The 2 of them immediately thought of the incident that happened in the city a month ago. They didn't expect this group of aboriginals to be so vengeful that they didn't care about the war and directly sneaked into the Yun Nation just for that seemingly trivial incident. The 2 of them were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they would have stopped Yiku on that day. At the very least, they would have taken their leave. "Let's talk this out," the 2 shouted. The others simply ignored their words and silently brandished their weapons. Each of them was full of murderous intent. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Seeing that the other party wasn't going to show any mercy, the 2 hurriedly shouted for the other experts. "Who dares to behave atrociously in the warlord's residence?" A loud shout came from outside the warlord's residence. When the 3 experts heard the shout for help, they immediately emerged from the residences around the warlord's residence. In a few flashes, they appeared inside the warlord's residence. However, as soon as their feet touched the ground, they were surrounded by 5 huge figures. Aboriginals. The 3 of them were shocked when they saw the people around them. "Warlord, it's bad. The aboriginals are attacking." Hearing the screams coming from the courtyard, Yiku jumped out of his bed and asked, "What's going on?" "It's the aboriginals. They're all earthwheel experts. We can't stop them. Both Chi and you are dead." Yiku's face turned green when he heard this. He didn't need to think to know why the aboriginals were here. The reason he dared to rob the aboriginal caravan was that the aboriginals were at war with Great Xia, and Great Xia was the most powerful country in the world. So what if he robbed the aboriginal caravan? It wasn't like those barbarians would come looking for him. Great Xia and the Yun Nation had already made their move. It would be good if the aboriginals weren't destroyed. However, he didn't expect Great Xia to be defeated so quickly. Her Majesty said not to leave even a chicken or dog alive. Hong Bao was a little regretful. He slapped the concubine's head and fresh blood immediately spurted out. Search! That bastard warlord was named by Her Majesty. We must find him. Hong Bao ordered the people behind him. The 7 or 8 people behind him scattered in all directions. Meanwhile, the massacre in the distance was still going on. Hong Bao sat in the room with a big saber and a big horse. Even when the sky was about to brighten, there wasn't a single living person in the entire warlord's residence. However, the warlord was still nowhere to be found. Have you found the location of the treasury? Yes, it's in the back courtyard. The rest of you continue to search. Let's go to the treasury first. Sir, the soldiers from the barracks in the city should be rushing over soon, someone said. Killing 2 batches of guards previously had bought them some time. However, the sky was about to brighten, and the soldiers from the barracks were probably not far from here. Lead the way. Half of you will follow me to the treasury. Hong Bao suddenly remembered something. Who knows how to write? The people behind him looked at each other. It was still difficult for them to recognize a bunch of words, but it was really difficult for them to write them. The last person took a step forward and said proudly, Sir, I know how to write. Find a conspicuous place and write this on him. A life for a life, a debt to be repaid. Murder your grandpa. This is called a justifiable attack, Hong Bao said softly. These words were specially instructed by Principal Run over the radio. We will do our best, the burly man said as he patted his chest. Following which, he went to the main hall of the residence and dragged 2 corpses over. He pondered for a long time before gesturing on the ground for a long time. Then, he raised his head and saw that the sky was already bright. He hesitated for a while before writing a few bloody words on the wall. Murder XX, a debt to be repaid X. Murder your grandpa. Chapter 407. That's all. Hong Bao walked around the so-called treasury with an ugly expression. There were more than 10 boxes of silver, some weapons and armors that looked impressive, and 1 box contained crystal cups and an extremely beautiful mirror. The bronze mirrors couldn't be compared to them at all. The most valuable thing here was this box of crystal cups and mirrors. However, he was the warlord of the Yun Nation, and the Yun Nation was famous for being extremely wealthy. How could this be all he had? There was only one possibility. This was only a treasury on the surface, and there was definitely another place to store the truly precious items. Sir, what should we do? Move them away. Move these away. Hong Bao pointed at the box containing the glass cups and mirrors. Even if he didn't understand, he could tell that these things were much more valuable than the silver. Set a fire and burn everything. We'll come back again after they dig out the real treasury, Hong Bao said as he rubbed his chin. Since they couldn't find the treasury, they would burn everything here. Perhaps the treasury would be exposed. He would wait outside the city for a day and come back again after this place was burned to the ground to see if there were any traces of the treasury. We haven't found the warlord yet. He can run, but he can't run away from the city. His roots are here, so he can't leave. It's almost daybreak. Set a fire first before evacuating. Fill up the wells and break everything that can hold water. They won't be able to put out the fire. Yes. After that, everyone split up. Some set fires everywhere, while others filled up the wells. At the same time, they broke everything that could hold water to put out the fire. For example, the buckets and water tanks in the courtyard. 1, 2, 3. When one of the water tanks was broken, a person fell out. The person who broke the water tank was stunned. The person in the water tank rolled on the ground and ran away. That person was naturally Yi Ke. The screams outside were long gone, and only the sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. It was self-evident what this meant. Everyone in the residence was dead, including his 22 concubines and his children. Yi Ke was scared out of his wits. He cursed the useless guards in his heart as he carefully hid and waited for the barbarians to leave before escaping. However, he couldn't hide now. After the aboriginal warrior who broke the water jar recovered from his shock, he sneered, drew out the sword from his back, and threw it at that person. Then he walked over and stepped on his body to pull out the knife. After wiping it with his clothes, he suddenly thought of something. This person's physique seemed to be that of the city lord who had yet to be found. It couldn't be him, right? That aboriginal warrior, was elated. This was truly a pie that fell from the sky. Are you the city lord? The Aboriginal warrior asked after seeing that he was still breathing after flipping him over. Ika was vomiting blood like a crab. The stab just now had pierced through his lung. Is that so? Pa! A slap in the face. Is it true or not? Pa! Another slap. Answer me. Is it true or not? Pa 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 pa. Are you still breathing? Out of breath? Forget it. Bringing your head back will be a great merit. Seeing that the Aboriginal soldier was no longer breathing, the Aboriginal soldier chopped off his head. Regardless of whether you're the city lord or not, I'll take it as you are. Boss, I brought the city lord's head back. Is this it? Then, he excitedly ran to find a red packet to present. Hong Bao stood in the courtyard and looked at the head that his subordinate brought over. The face was so deformed that even his mother wouldn't be able to recognize it, let alone Hong Bao. Where's the corpse? It's there. I'll bring it over. After a while, the guard brought the corpse over again. It was very dirty, but from the physique, it looked similar. Didn't you ask where the treasury is? Oh, I forgot. Forget it. I'll remember your merit. Hong Bao waved his hand. In any case, he had snatched a box of treasures. As for the real treasury, now that the city lord and his family were all dead, he wasn't sure if the guards could dig it out. He would wait for 2 days and see. Even if they couldn't find the real treasury, those crystal cups and mirrors should be worth a lot of money. It would be a small merit to hand them over to Her Majesty. By the time the surrounding flames were set ablaze, the guards in the city had also arrived. Let's go and kill our way out. If Rinpoche knew that this group of people had snatched those useless glass cups and mirrors back, he wondered what kind of expression he would have. At this moment, he was on Earth. He tidied himself up and prepared to leave. Today's matter was a little special. He had to meet someone, a very special person, Chi Jiayu. To be honest, he didn't know how to treat this woman who looked 80% like the Empress. If he didn't guess wrongly, Chi Jiayu was probably the Empress from Earth. They were 2 different people, but in some aspects, they were actually the same person. Otherwise, that trace of the Empress's soul wouldn't have had such a reaction when she saw her. Just like when he met the 7th prince. Rinpoche felt that this situation was a little tricky and didn't know how to deal with it. Ignore her? However, the thought of the Empress's soul at that time was like burying a thorn in his heart. Kill her? From a certain point of view, this was the best solution. He didn't feel guilty at all for killing an innocent person. He had already killed hundreds and thousands of people, so why would he care about an ordinary person? However, she was, after all, the Empress of this world. This identity made it a little difficult for him to kill her. Therefore, after thinking for a few days, he finally contacted Shun Feng to meet her. The method was very simple. He asked Shun Feng to look for their teaching assistant and say that a certain company was recruiting a few interns. Those who wanted to apply had to submit their resumes. Then, he just had to see if her name was on the resume. If she wasn't, he would think of other ways. This matter was easily settled, and today's appointment was made. Rinpoche drove to a cafe in Shanghai and found a seat to sit down. After waiting in the cafe for about 20 minutes, he saw a young woman walk to the door through the window. She was wearing a floral skirt and a white lace shirt. She looked youthful and a little charming. When he saw her, his murderous intent began to rise. It's her. Rinpoche immediately knew that the person in question had arrived. Then his phone rang. Hello, is this Mr. Rin? Table 16. I can already see you, Rinpoche said faintly. Chi Jiayu pushed the door open and looked around. After asking the waiter, she was led to Rinpoche by the waiter. Hello, Chi Jiayu said first, then was a little surprised when she saw Rinpoche's appearance. It's you. Take a seat, Rinpoche said faintly. Are you that stalker from last time? Why did you beat around the bush and spend so much effort to trick me here? Don't tell me you want to woo me? Do you know that your behavior is very annoying? Although it seems like you put in a lot of effort. But, I'm sorry, I'm a good person. I should find someone better. After Chi Jiayu recovered from her surprise, she opened her mouth and said a series of words. Rinpoche was speechless. What was going on? Rinpoche was puzzled as he watched Chi Jiayu turn around and walk away after saying a bunch of words. What did she say? What was going on? Chapter 408. Being humiliated. This was the first time Rinpoche had such an experience. For a moment, even the killing intent in his mind dissipated. His head was full of question marks. After sitting in the same spot for a while, Rinpoche couldn't help but laugh. He wasn't embarrassed or angry because he didn't have those thoughts in the first place. Therefore, this development made him feel very amused. It was also a pity. He wanted to talk to her before deciding what to do with her. Rinpoche even considered keeping her as his mistress. 1 million a year? 10 million? Money didn't mean much to him. Keeping such a small empress might come in handy in the future. He wouldn't touch her as long as no one else touched her. Unfortunately, she ruined this opportunity. He ruined his own path. Since the other party wasn't willing to talk, there was no need to talk. It was better to kill her. Rinpoche threw the money on the table and walked out of the cafe with a smile. Chi Jiayu was nowhere to be seen. Rinpoche drove to the entrance of SH University, found a place where he could see the whole gate, and parked his car there. He leaned back slightly and played an old song on his phone, Trouble Caused by the Moon. Listening to the familiar tune, Rinpoche gently shook his legs, took out his pistol with one hand, wiped it with a piece of paper, and put it back on his waist. He then adjusted his seat and leaned back. After waiting for about 2 hours, Rinpoche saw a figure wearing a flowery skirt and a white lace shirt appear at the school gate. It's all your fault, trouble caused by the moon. Rinpoche hummed a tune as he opened the door and got out of the car. He put his hands in his pockets and walked toward the school gate. Should I use a gun or my hands? Rinpoche thought to himself as he walked. The sound of a gun would be too loud, so he should use his hands. However, when he was about to cross the road, he was suddenly stopped by someone. Mr. Ren. Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at the 3 people who stopped him. There was a familiar smell on them. It was the smell of people from the country. They came so quickly. Had they been following him? Did they know what he was going to do? Mr. Ren, our minister wants to talk to you. One of them took out his phone and dialed the number before putting it by Rinpoche's ear. Mr. Ren, remember what you promised the country. Yang Sen's voice came from the other end of the phone. What? Rinpoche asked. You promised the country that you wouldn't kill anyone. I hope you keep your word. You are an extraordinary person, and it is not worth ruining your reputation for such a small matter. I also do not wish for anything to affect our cooperation. Yang Sun warned. No matter what, we don't want to see that kid called Chi Jiayu get hurt. No matter what, we don't want to see that child named Chi Jiayu get hurt. She's just an ordinary person. Although she looks like that person, she's just an ordinary girl in today's society. She doesn't belong to the same world as Mr. Ren. Rinpoche smiled. Rinpoche smiled and said, It won't affect you if I provide for her, right? This was a consensual thing. Although it's against social customs, it's not your business. I hope Mr. Ren means what you say. If you have time, it would be best for Mr. Ren to come to the laboratory. Recently, there have been some results that Mr. Ren might be interested in. After Yang Sun finished his warning, he once again brought up the matter of cooperation between the 2 parties. I mean, Yang, come on. Rinpoche didn't answer and handed the phone back to her. Goodbye. Rinpoche waved at the 3 of them and continued walking toward the school gate. How could he possibly turn around and leave in this kind of situation? Didn't that mean that Yang Sun guessed correctly? He couldn't possibly make it clear that he really wanted to kill someone, right? He would lose face. In the Jianghu, he had to keep his word. Since he said that he would not kill anyone, he could not let the other party have a hold on him. Rinpoche felt that he was quite a moral person. As Rinpoche strode into the university gate, he felt that the 3 pairs of eyes were still watching him from behind. When Chi Jiayu heard the footsteps behind her, she looked back. A trace of shock and disgust flashed in her eyes. She said in a loud voice, I won't steal your boyfriend. That Lu Zhongliang just likes me. You can't control your own man. Don't bother me, okay? As soon as he said that, the surrounding people heard it clearly. One by one, they stood to the side and looked at the 2 of them as if they had been injected with chicken blood. A man and a woman fighting over a man. This was much more exciting than 2 women fighting over a man. Run Bachin, he had been hitting the goose for a long time, but in the end, the goose had pecked his eyes. Run Bachin cheated people every day. Unexpectedly, there would be a day when he would be cheated by someone else. Rinpochian reconsidered whether he should shoot her now. Follow me to the State Security Department. Rinpochian rummaged through his pocket for a long time and found his identification. He had specially brought it with him today. I have a special poor certificate, single certificate, and FFF certificate. Do you want to take a look? Chi Jiayu looked disgusted. Nowadays, what kind of identification couldn't be made online? Did he think that she was a fool? This thing might be able to prove my identity. Rin Bachin took out a gun from the back of his waist. The surrounding students were shocked. Chi Jiayu was also shocked, following which anger flashed in her eyes. This guy was getting more and more overboard. This was SH University. What was he trying to do with a fake gun? Bang! Without waiting for Chi Jiayu to speak, Rin Bachin suddenly fired a shot at the ground. The sound of the gunshot resounded in the campus. This time, the surrounding people were immediately shocked. This was a real gun. The man in front of them was really holding a gun. Oh, I'm really sorry. It was a misfire. I still have to write a self-reflection when I go back. I reckon that I will also be punished. Rin Bachin revealed a face of surprise. It was as if he had really misfired. As Rin Bachin spoke, he removed the magazine and stuffed it into his pocket. He flashed his identification to the surrounding people and said, "The State Security Department has a matter that requires this student's assistance in investigating. I'm very sorry for the misfire just now. I hope it didn't affect anyone." After hearing what he said, the surrounding students' terrified expressions finally eased. "You can inform the police and the school to confirm my identity." Rin Bachin then said to Chi Jiu, "If that's the case, the impact will be greater. So many people saw me, and the surveillance cameras captured my figure. You don't have to worry about your safety. My identity can't be faked. Then we'll wait for the police to come." Chi Jiayu wasn't moved at all. Motherf asterisk Kerr. Rin Bachin thought to himself. This Chi Jiayu was really vigilant. "Mr. Ren." The three people came in front of Rin Bachin again. "Our team is handling matters. You'd better not interfere." Rin Bachin warned them. The three of them looked at each other. Although Rin Bachin's act of shooting was rather vile, he dealt with it in time. He explained that it was a misfire and even lied that he would be punished when he returned. This managed to suppress the majority of the matter. With his identity, the current situation was still tolerable. After all, Rin Bachin's identification was real. In terms of identity, he could really be considered as a member of a certain department in the state. "You'd better give our department head an explanation. The current situation is different from what you said. I'll submit the report. Now, I have some matters to discuss with this student." Rin Bachin nodded. The appearance of these three people and Rin Bachin's words made the other students believe most of it. One by one, they revealed looks of surprise. So, there really was a secret department. They wondered if there was a dragon group or something. Even Chi Jiayu started to be dubious. She carefully sized up these three people, trying to determine if they were actually hired by this guy. Previously, even the teaching assistant was deceived. She actually helped him recruit people in the class. Otherwise, how could the current situation have happened? 5 minutes later, the police arrived at the scene. "What happened?" "He has a gun." Chi Jiayu pointed at Rin Bachin and hid behind the police. Rin Bachin ignored her small movements and handed his identification to the police. "I need this student's help with something. This is my identification. You can verify it." When the police verified Rin Bachin's identity, the surrounding people finally confirmed it as well. "Please come with me, student." Rin Bachin pointed at Chi Jiayu. "I'm sorry. I thought you were a stalker. I had such an experience when I was young. If the police hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid. Since then, I've been very afraid of strangers." Chi Jiayu looked apologetic and pitiful. Rin Bachin looked at her performance. She vividly portrayed the fear, caution, and apology of a little rabbit in danger. He felt that the Oscars really owed her a Best Actress award. Chapter 409. Why exactly are you looking for me? Chi Jayu looked a little perturbed as they sat in Ren Baqian's car. For a second-year student, the country's secret organization meant too much, and she couldn't stay calm. Ren Baqian turned to look at her and suppressed the murderous intent in his heart. He would have this reaction every time he saw her. Previously, he thought of keeping her as his mistress, but now that he thought about it, it didn't make sense. What was the point of keeping someone he wanted to kill every time he saw her? To hone his temperament? This was a good idea. The more he experienced, the more murderous he became. Perhaps he was influenced by the company he kept. After interacting with the Empress and those soldiers who faced death, it was inevitable that he would be influenced by them. There were also some things that were suppressed and hidden in his nature that began to take root and sprout when the thread of moral restraint was broken. All these factors resulted in his current character. Sometimes he was very peaceful and sometimes kind, but sometimes he would want to kill someone because he didn't like them or because of some trivial matters. Do you know this person? Ren Baqian took out his phone and showed Chi Jiayu a photo. In the photo was a bald, fierce-looking man with crisscross scars on his upper body. The background was a dense forest. Just by looking at the person in the photo, one could feel the ferocious aura coming from him. I don't know. Chi Jiayu shook her head. Of course, Ren Baqian knew that she didn't know him. This photo was taken by Li Qianxiu. If she knew him, it would be a big deal. What about this? Ren Baqian showed another photo. It was a photo of a girl dozing off tied to the back of a cow. The background was also the wilderness. I don't know them either. Chi Jiayu was at a loss and didn't know what Ren Baqian meant. Remember these two people. If you see them, contact me, Ren Baqian said as he put away his phone. Oh, Chi Jiayu didn't understand, but still nodded. She didn't know why Ren Baqian thought that she would meet these two people. Of course not. Ren Baqian was just looking for an excuse. After all, he couldn't just tell her nothing after getting her into the car, right? You will meet them. You don't need to know the specifics. Just call me and tell me when the time comes. On one hand, he had to suppress the killing intent in his heart. On the other hand, he had to fabricate a lie. Even though lying had become a habit for him, he was still a little annoyed. What annoyed him even more was this person's appearance. You may leave. As for the others who ask, Ren Baqian muttered to himself for a while. He could imagine that some people would definitely look for her and ask what he had said after he left. Just say. Ren Baqian suddenly turned his head and asked, Is 10 million yuan enough to support you? Huh. I'm sorry, I'm a good person. I should have found someone better. Chi Jiayu subconsciously said. Yes, that's what I said. If they ask, just tell them about it. Although they are in the same department as me, they are not in the same group. The meaning of these words is clear to all of us. It means that you are my chosen one. The photos and related words I showed you earlier, you have to keep them to yourself. Before the matter is resolved, you can't tell anyone. You should know the significance of the secret department's work. Don't cause trouble for yourself, and don't cause trouble for me. Ren Baqian waved his hand. That's it. Remember to say that. Oh. Chi Jiayu was still in a daze. She had no idea what was going on. Why do I have to do all this? Chi Jiayu finally thought of asking a question. You don't have the right to refuse. Furthermore, once you're done, I will help you apply for funding for your informant activities. After Ren Baqian drove away, she stood in the parking lot and stared blankly for a long time. If someone really wanted to support her with 10 million yuan, would she agree? 10 million yuan. She wouldn't be able to earn that much even if she worked for a lifetime. It was tempting to think about it. Unfortunately, this wasn't true. This is student Chi Jiayu, right? I have a few questions to ask you. 3 men walked in front of Chi Jiayu. They were the 3 men in the campus just now. They seemed to know Ren Baqian and were from the same department. Chi Jiayu recognized them at a glance. What's the matter? What did Mr. Ren say to you just now? One of them asked. Chi Jiayu immediately recalled what Ren Baqian said just now. With a shy look on her face, she said, He asked me if I could support him with 10 million yuan. How did you answer? I'm sorry, I'm a good person. I should find someone better, Chi Jiayu said. The 3 men looked at Chi Jiayu. This kind of hair clip was really rare. What else did he say? He didn't say anything and just let me out of the car. If you encounter any problems in the future, you can call this number. One of the men took out a pen and a notebook, wrote a line of phone number on it, and handed it to Chi Jiayu. What does that mean? It means that if you encounter any danger or trouble in the future, you can call this number. I will encounter danger. Chi Jiayu was surprised. People will always encounter danger. You can even be knocked down by a car on the road. The man said something ambiguous. Sorry to disturb you. After the three men left, Chi Jiayu held the piece of paper with the phone number and thought about the two photos Ren Bachin showed her. He said that she would encounter these two people, and these people said that she would encounter danger. What did they mean? Were these two people very dangerous? After Ren Bachin left Chi Jiayu, the murderous intent in his heart gradually subsided. This feeling of wanting to kill someone, but having no choice but to suppress it was uncomfortable. He gave his family a call and chatted for a while before he finally calmed down. Now, his family had already accepted the situation of not being able to see him all year round. However, they were still concerned about his marriage. Every time they called, they didn't forget to ask when they would bring the girl back to see her. Ren Bachin's mind was filled with the idea of bringing this imposter back to let his parents meet her. However, he gave up on this idea as soon as it appeared. If the Empress met his parents in the future and found out from them that he brought a girl like her back, he reckoned that he would be out of luck. For the next 2 days, he stayed in the villa in a daze. Although Yang's son said that there was progress in his research, he wasn't in the mood to go over now. After staying in the villa for 2 days, he brought a batch of radio stations, walkie-talkies, batteries, and solar panels back to the other world. These things were still very lacking in the other world. Before technology was developed, the first thing to do was to popularize instant communication. After leaving Pingle Park, he went to see the Empress. Looking at the already half-empty candy tree in the main hall, Ren Bachin felt that if the aboriginals weren't physically strong, the Empress would have a toothache sooner or later based on the way she ate candy. Fortunately, the Empress's body was extremely strong, and even ordinary swords couldn't injure her. If the Empress had a toothache, it would be much more dangerous to treat her than a crocodile. After boiling the cotton candy for half a day, the candy tree was filled with them. Ren Bachin took 2 large cotton candy, sat on the sofa, and passed one to the Empress. These days, I saw someone who looked very similar to your Majesty. I almost mistook her for someone else. This world is really wonderful. There's actually someone who looks so similar to your Majesty. Ren Bachin took a bite of the cotton candy and smiled. Oh, in that case, I want to see if they really look alike, the Empress said with great interest. The next time we go back, your Majesty, come with me to take a look. Ren Bachin smiled. After a few minutes, Ren Bachin discovered something strange. The Empress actually stopped eating after taking a bite of the cotton candy. She was sitting there quietly watching a television series. With the Empress's love for sweets, this kind of thing was really rare. Why aren't you eating, your Majesty? The Empress turned her head and looked at Ren Bachin. After a while, she slowly said, I don't know why, but I have a toothache. I'm not in the mood to eat. When the Empress felt pain, she wouldn't look as delicate and pitiful as an ordinary girl. Therefore, even if she didn't say anything, it was very hard for others to notice. Chapter 410. The Empress actually had a toothache. This was a serious matter. Could it really be a toothache caused by eating sweets? Ren Bachin wasn't sure. Previously, he was just thinking about it. Was there a need to be so accurate? The Empress's skin was impervious to even swords and knives, yet she actually had a toothache. Ren Bachin found it hard to believe. Your Majesty, why don't you open your mouth and let me take a look? Ren Bachin asked. The Empress rolled her eyes at him. How is it possible to open her mouth and let him take a look? She would never agree to this kind of thing. It doesn't matter, the Empress said faintly. A toothache isn't an illness, but it can kill you. If you really have a toothache, I'm afraid you will have to eat less sweets in the future, Ren Bachin advised. Upon hearing that, the Empress raised her eyebrows and looked at Ren Bachin with slanted eyes. She looked as if she would beat him up if he didn't explain himself. Your Majesty, if you eat sweets when you have a toothache, It will easily cause periodontal disease. Rinpoche looked at the Empress and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I already said it doesn't matter. The Empress ignored him. Why don't we get the doctor to take a look? Rinpoche asked. No matter what, since she was sick, she had to be treated. She couldn't possibly be stubborn. Hongwan, get the doctor to say that I have a toothache, the Empress thought for a while and said to the people behind her. Not long after, the people from the doctor's office came to the hall. There were 3 of them, and they were all very old. It seemed that the older the doctors were, the more experienced they were. This was the case no matter which world they were in. After the few of them greeted each other, one of them came forward to take the Empress's pulse. Rinpoche couldn't help but interrupt. A toothache. Can you tell by taking a pulse? Noisy. The Empress glared at him, and he had no choice but to shut up. Where does your Majesty have a toothache? The Empress pointed at her cheek. May I trouble your Majesty to open your mouth and let me take a look at your teeth, the doctor said after taking the Empress's pulse. I'm fine. All of you can leave. The Empress waved her hand. Your Majesty. Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Wasn't it just taking a look at her teeth? Why was it so difficult? Your Majesty, it's better to take a look. Teeth are not a small matter. It would be inappropriate if it affects your appetite in the future, the doctor advised. The Empress frowned and hesitated for a long time before opening her mouth slightly. The doctor didn't dare to get too close. He looked outside for a long time, but couldn't figure out what was going on. Your Majesty, I am incompetent. The doctor apologized and took a few steps back. Another doctor came up. After the 3 doctors examined the Empress, none of them found anything wrong with her teeth. Finally, he prescribed some sedative, pain-relieving medicine for the Empress and asked someone to brew it for her to consume. The medical skills of this world were very impressive in other aspects, such as the black mud cream. However, the medical skills of this world were very backward when it came to dentistry. In fact, it wasn't just this world. It was the same in ancient times on Earth. Many celebrities suffered from diseased teeth. Some were tied to the teeth with ropes, and then the other end was tied to the arrow. After pulling the bow, whoosh, the arrow flew out, and the teeth were gone. Or tie one into the tooth and the other to the door. He opened and closed the door. Whoosh. His teeth were gone. It looked simple, but in fact it was very risky, and it could easily lead to other problems. For example, Wan Jiao, a famous general from the Eastern Jin Kingdom, had a tooth disease and went to have it extracted. As a result, he suffered a stroke and died in less than 10 days. Therefore, many people used the waiting treatment method. For example, they waited for the tooth to fall out, but they got used to the pain. Liu Yu, a poet from the Southern Song dynasty, wrote in his diary while waiting. It seems like a disease, but it's not. My arm is broken, but it's hard to keep my teeth when they fall. Diseased teeth, it seems like a tooth is going to fall out. One tooth is on the verge of falling out, and my eyes are blurry. Old Tan, it seems like another tooth is going to fall out. Teeth fall, but don't chew. Feet are lame, but can still walk. Against the wine, it doesn't matter if it falls out. It's not like it can't be eaten. A child with broken teeth can endure mockery. Today's rotten rice can be eaten with a spoon. Miscellaneous poems on first return, damn it. I really can't eat it anymore. From Liu Yu's diary, it could be seen that dental problems were very troublesome for the ancient people. After taking the medicine, the Empress couldn't help but start to eat sweets again. However, she had to stop after a while. Although there was pain-relieving medicine, after eating sweets, she started to feel unbearable pain. Not being able to eat sweets made the Empress feel a little depressed. She even stopped watching television and lay on the couch in a daze. Tossing and turning could be described as the Empress's current state. Your Majesty, follow me to Earth in 2 days' time. The dentists on Earth are more experienced. After all, everyone has their own specialties. We have dentists who specialize in dentistry. Rinpoche looked at the Empress and couldn't help but say. The Empress remained silent. At this moment, she finally realized the seriousness of the matter. Not being able to eat sweets made her feel more conflicted than if Great Xia attacked. Seeing the Empress remain silent, Rinpoche knew that she had acquiesced. Move the candy tree away in a while, Ren Baqian said. This was to prevent the Empress from wanting to eat the candy tree when she saw it. No way. The Empress sat up from the couch and glared at Ren Baqian. That candy tree had almost become her treasure. Whoever dared to touch that tree, she would teach them a lesson. Ren Baqian helplessly spread his hands when he saw the Empress looking at him covetously. 2 days later, Ren Baqian and the Empress returned to Earth again. The Empress changed her clothes and sat on the sofa with an ice cream in her hand. After taking 2 bites, she had no choice but to stop. In the past, she never felt uncomfortable eating cold food, but it was different this time. Your Majesty, let's go to the dentist. Ren Baqian changed his clothes and went downstairs. Both of them got into the car, and Ren Baqian began to follow the route to the dentist's hospital that he found on the map on his phone. The Empress was still in low spirits. Even though the Empress didn't speak much, Ren Baqian could still sense whether she was in a normal mood or not. She will be fine after seeing the dentist. Ren Baqian comforted her. At the dentist's hospital, they registered and took their disposable tools. Ren Baqian and the Empress waited for a while before it was their turn. The dentist was a female doctor in her 30s. When she saw the Empress, her eyes flickered slightly. Do you have any medical records? No. What's the problem? The dentist asked casually. She has a toothache. It should be here. Ren Baqian pointed to his face and said, the Empress should be suffering from a toothache here. Is she sick or are you sick? Tell me yourself. What's the problem? Where does it hurt? The dentist said impatiently. Ren Baqian frowned. This doctor's attitude wasn't very friendly. Hurry up, there are still patients waiting behind, the dentist said unhappily. The Empress sneered and raised her eyebrows. It had been many years since she met someone who talked to her like this. Toothache was already irritating enough, but she still met someone who was so ignorant. Both of you look fine. Next. The dentist glanced at both of them and shifted her gaze behind them. Hee. Ren Baqian chuckled. He placed the gun on the table and pointed the muzzle at the female dentist. Violence couldn't solve all problems, but it could solve most of them. Ren Baqian deeply agreed with this saying. At the very least, he could make this damned dentist put away her ugly face. Pow! As the gun was placed on the table, the dentist's expression changed. Both of you better leave quickly. I'm going to call the police. The Empress turned her head and looked at Ren Baqian. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. There was only one meaning. Can I kill her? Ren Baqian cursed his bad luck. He didn't expect to meet such an ignorant doctor. Would it kill her to have a better attitude? Go ahead. You can call the police, Ren Baqian said indifferently. However, before he could finish his sentence, the Empress held the gun in her hand and pulled the trigger. She had seen Ren Baqian use this gun several times. It wasn't worth it for her to kill such a person. Ren Baqian's gun was just right. Why didn't it fire? After the Empress pulled the trigger, she looked at Ren Baqian suspiciously. She had seen Ren Baqian use this gun in the past. Ren Baqian was speechless. The safety is off. Ren Baqian removed the safety and placed the gun back on the table. I'm sorry. What I said just now might have made you uncomfortable. There are too many patients, and I was a little anxious. I apologize. The dentist was so scared that her face turned pale. She trembled as she spoke. Bang! The Empress fired a shot at her. A hole immediately appeared in the glass behind her, and the surrounding area was filled with cracks. So this is how you use it. The Empress suddenly understood. She aimed the gun at the dentist and fired. Bang! The people who were waiting to see the dentist were dumbfounded, following which they ran out one after another. As they ran, they shouted, "Murder!" No one expected to encounter such a thing while seeing a dentist. At this moment, the dentist was already paralyzed on the ground. The Empress's second shot grazed past her ear. This thing isn't easy to use. The Empress casually threw the gun to Ren Baqian. Bang! Ren Baqian grabbed the gun with one hand and cursed. He lowered his head and looked at his leg. Blood had dyed his pants red. The wound was very painful. It was so painful that he kept shaking his leg. Zixiao! Ren Baqian wanted to say something, but stopped. What's wrong with you? The Empress looked puzzled. She didn't know why Ren Baqian shot her with a gun. She didn't understand guns at all. She didn't even have a concept of them, let alone knowing what misfire was. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.